Chris, wherever you are up in cyberspace. Give us a signal that you're ready. Signal from the sky. Oh, there's my signal. All right. I'd like to start the Architectural Board of Review meeting for November 26th with public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on an item not on today's agenda? No? All right. We'll close that portion of the meeting and move on to approval of the minutes of the ABR meeting for Monday, November 12th. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes? Motion made by Kirk, seconded by Stephanie. Let's see, where are we? The minutes were, this was, item 1 was postponed, so item 2, any comments on item 2? Item 3.
Madam Chair, I have one comment.
Yeah, Paul?
On item 3, the vote action is incorrectly noted. It says 3-0-0, and it should be 3-2 and 1 absent. So
All
it'd be
right.
3-2-1.
That is correct. Anything else?
Madam Chair, yes, on number 1 under the motion to cross out the word shifts at the end of that sentence.
Mm-hmm. All right, good. Anything else?
No.
Item 4.
Madam Chair, under the motion, number 1, provide a layout of framing of the front walls separate from the glazing for visibility of the structural grid and materials. So insert structural in front of grid.
Okay. I agree. That was a good call. I still don't know what we mean by Santa Barbara interest in a color, but we'll just leave that. Anything else on item 4? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Then we have a consent calendar for November 19th. Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar for November 19th?
So moved.
Motion made by Kirk.
Second.
Seconded by Stephanie.
Thank you. Consent calendar for November 19th. We had item A, 4151 Foothill Road. A review after final was approved with conditions. Item B, 300 West Alomar Avenue, also called Oak Park, was continued 2 weeks. 423 West Victoria Street, the West Side Neighborhood Center, was approved as submitted. Item D, 258 Canyon Drive, Stevens Park, was approved with conditions. Item E, 336 Anacapa Street, got a final approval with conditions. Item F, 546 Scenic Drive, was referred to the full board. That'll be on our full board meeting next time, December 10th. Item G, 700 East Anapamoose Street. That was a courtesy review, and the courtesy review was held. And actually, the applicant voluntarily agreed to bring back a landscaping plan for another courtesy review. So that was nice of them to do that. Item H, 2700 Delavina Street, was approved as submitted, and consent on the 19th was reviewed by Paul Zink and Chris Gilliland.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carried. Consent calendar for November 26th. Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion made by Kirk,
Second.
seconded by Stephanie. That's today.
All right, consent calendar today, November 26th, we had item A, 1085 Coast Village Road. Got a final approval as noted. Item B, 1320 East Gutierrez Street. Got a final approval with conditions, and consent today was reviewed by Paul Zink.
All right, thanks, Tony. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Announcements. Tony, any announcements from you?
Yeah. There you go. To announce my possible absence next week. I just
sorry?
don't. I may have to be absent next week. I may be able to attend part of the meeting.
Next week we
But
don't meet.
the next meeting,
December 10th?
December 10th,
Okay.
because I have to appear before Montecito BAR,
Okay.
and I won't know until the agenda is published.
Okay. Any more announcements, Tony?
So have an item on the Montecito,
Yeah, I knew about that too. Okay.
so I don't know when I'll be.
So, Gary, you'll be here for the whole meeting, and Kirk, and Dawn,
I'll be here.
and
Talk to
Chris, I
Chris.
think will be here. Okay. Okay. I don't have any other announcements. I'm not sure if I
Any
have
more
anything.
announcements from you guys? No? All right, subcommittee reports. All right, item 1, 222, moving right along, 222 North Milford Street.
We don't have someone take
This is a continued conceptual review, third concept review.
Doesn't appear to be anyone there.
Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. The Fresh Market.
We need to have it on here. So
Yeah, we need to just bring it right here.
Facing you?
facing us, yes.
Laying down on.
So we have 10 items. Do you want me to just go down the list and you can? Sure. First of all, your names for the record.
Pardon me?
Your names for the record.
Thomas Henkin?
Do you want to sit down?
Oh, sure.
Jose Cervantes.
Somebody want the hot seat?
I can sit here.
Dave Meadows.
Dave Meadows, Fresh Market.
Okay.
Keith White from the Fresh Market as well.
So we're looking at, item 1 was the changes since the last review are appreciated. Number 2, lower the parapet heights. Do you want to just go through them one by one and you can tell me how you addressed them? Sure. Can you tell us what you did?
Actually, we've been looking at the entire comment. One of the comments was regarding hierarchy of entries. The previous submittal had 2 very symmetrical entries on either side of the main entry. And the symmetry, we felt, was causing part of the lacking of hierarchy to the overall architectural theme. So we took a look at more of an asymmetrical approach to the facade, breaking it down into 2 major masses with a submass that relates to the main entry of a secondary tenant that is here, being here. That's part of the whole mass. So they really read more as 2 tenants now rather than kind of a confusing 3 tenants of the last go-round. That addressed the height issues in terms of those pieces by themselves, we felt was the issue in terms of them looking too high in comparison. Now with a longer, wider mass, we feel that the proposal that you're seeing here will create a better sense of entry and scale.
Additionally, if I might add,
Sure.
As we've gotten further into our design, thinking about our standard equipment, some of the equipment we'll see here, and also knowing that there will be a kind of a mandatory approach to screening You can't see rooftop equipment. The heights that we're looking at now kind of lend themselves to that screening application. We have a central piece of equipment that sits on the roof and would likely be visible from the front in our other presentation. So we think we're closer to something we'll actually, at least from the front, conceal that piece of equipment.
And for your reference, the existing parapet height is this line here. And we've raised this parapet approximately 2 feet on that side, just to give more of a stepped appearance to the facade. And for clarity, this element here is an existing mechanical screen that we've just treated. It's right now a slatted metal, I believe.
Which one?
It is.
This little element
Oh, that
here,
little
it's
element.
actually
It's beyond,
quite a bit beyond,
back.
almost towards the rear
Yes.
opposite facade. So it really looks like it's more of this facade than it actually is. It's in the background. Then additionally, to tie into the existing glue lamp beams, which seemed like that was quite, that went over quite well, we were going to use those. In this theme, we've also incorporated a horizontal wooden louver to match so that there'd be kind of a continuous wood theme throughout with some extra support columns in certain locations.
Give you a
to tie in.
sense of what that louver does across the front of the building. You're looking at 2 sections you'd see in this application.
This section here would be right through, where am I?
This section with these roof elements here.
Right through here, looking this way. And this section here is right through this, looking at that direction. This, these 2 elements would be this roof here and this roof beyond here. And then the existing roof plane here and the glue lamb beam running through the new columns. And what you're seeing there is just this little wrought iron enclosure for the outdoor plant area that's under that canopy.
Okay. That takes care of item 5. We're down to item 5 then.
Wow.
Because number 3 was restudy the main entrance facade to provide more architectural definition, not a single flat facade. Oh, let's move back up to item 3, because that was a comment having to do with in plan view, what you were doing to create definition between these. How did you address that?
Well, what we're proposing here is this particular facade is moved all the way out. This one is almost out, all the way out. That would be this line here. And then the next one steps back another 8 inches here.
So 8 inches difference between
Yeah.
these. And these are separated.
And these are completely separated. This is the existing tile roof, and this is the existing tile roof.
This one actually pops out further than this face. This face. These 2 are about the same also, but this one pops out in front.
I could just lay this down. This might help clarify some of that. Oops, I'm sorry, I got this backwards. Right now, the columns we're proposing, new columns here, start to generate that differentiation I think you guys are after, and we think there's even more opportunities, perhaps take these 3, push them a little more forward, create a little more differentiation, and then that horizontal element that you see, we can go back to in a minute, as it comes across the front of the building, may have an opportunity to step and back and forward with those architectural elements. So these columns are what we're seeing as that difference, and you can see here that the the path that we have to keep for ADA compliance and entry will help define some of those column locations. Oh, there you go. That's a great way to look at it. So the 3 you see here three you see here would be these three here. So that those could potentially come forward and then help create a little more visual interest with this horizontal element we're looking to create across the front there. So as those pieces step forward and back, it would kind of follow suit.
Allowing the path of travel to come behind it rather than in front of it.
Exactly.
Number 4 was better harmonize the facade elements and provide appropriate signage space. Number 5 was section cuts. Cut through the new entrance canopy portions. Number 6 was provide design details for the columns and parapet caps and cornices.
Since this is a new proposal, we are proposing a design that is a little bit more contemporary interpretation of the mission style. So with that, incorporating more wood detailing in both the louver system throughout the lower portion, but also a wood cornice integrated into the upper planes as a cornice. And those details, given some go-ahead at this meeting, would be detailed in the at your next available meeting.
So you didn't bring those?
No, these are, in fact, these sections were done on the airplane on the way out, so it was a little bit of a...
After the last meeting, we really did go back to the drawing board. I mean, I think it was a good move. It's revealed a lot of different things, a lot of opportunities, and so some of those things have not been fully hashed out yet.
Okay. Number 7 was any existing exposed wood elements should remain as wood elements not plastered, which it looks like you've done.
Yes.
8, it's understood that there will be no exposed gutter on the mansard roof. 9, provide a larger scale drawing noting the existing and proposed.
I'm sorry, existing and proposed.
What's existing and what's proposed.
Okay.
So,
We need to pull that together as a CAD document, but existing, do we have
Yeah, I
any?
think we
have
brought,
existing.
our last, I'm not sure if Tony has, Tony, do you have the drawing that we submitted the first time, what it looks like right now? That'll give you an idea as to what's existing right now.
but you've changed it completely, so.
Pretty much.
This section right through here goes all the way to here.
We were
There's
wanting a plan that
Oh.
showed clearly,
Plan,
And an
plan
elevation.
existing.
yeah,
And an elevation.
in the elevations too, yeah.
The elevation of what's existing?
Well, I mean, noting with notes. Okay.
Okay.
They don't really have a consolidated drawing right now.
Yeah.
We're kind of midstream, so to speak, on the concept. We want to get feedback from you guys. We'll take the next steps. But in terms of what's there now and what you're seeing on paper here, there's most certainly a big difference. And really right now, there's none of this. The front of the building runs along here. None of these columns exist. There's a few bushes that kind of follow the curb. And then
Where
there's-
are those bridges?
well, this is on an as-built plan, but they are right at the existing curb, and they kind of just dot along the front there. So there's really not a
That's the kind
lot.
of thing we really need to see, but we'll save that for comments. That's kind of what we were hoping for.
This is the existing, the way it is now. And the next sheet is what we're proposing along. That's what's there now.
So what you don't see on this plan is these. You don't see the bushes themselves, but these are little kind of just open concrete areas with dirt where they planted kind of hedge bushes along the front of the building. And obviously, there's no columns or anything else right now across the front of the building, just the overhang itself.
Yeah, it's all open.
And the proposed is where?
Underneath.
So here you see that, now you get the new columns.
So you're eliminating all those planters that are there.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's the new planters?
Well, currently, the plan does show
Here and
planters
here.
here, but we see this planter as problematic, as well as something here and perhaps as well there. And I'm talking to Jaime last week. He thinks that we may be able to do without them. They're not required elements. We had put them in there originally, but they do conflict with some of the challenges we have now at the front and our use of space. So we think they go away at the end of the day.
So really, there's whatever landscaping you, just to clarify for everybody else, what landscaping you had, you're taking out, and you really aren't going to have any landscaping.
Just at the front of the building, yes, at this point.
For the front of the building?
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly, okay.
And that was based on, this has been a very quickly developing change process.
This helps show us what's there now.
So we had a meeting on Wednesday, just before Thanksgiving, with Jaime, and got a little more feedback about those kind of details, and it would appear that we would likely eliminate those if possible.
Let's go back to let's go back to okay, then, so that was number 10, provide increased landscaping wherever possible. So that was my list. Is there anything else you want to add to the presentation? Because we just kind of went through the list.
Yes. Well, we have looked at both here, and we have another example of signage. We've reduced the sign size to be more in keeping with the criteria. And there's a for placement only item here that we'd like to just get your reaction upon. We're thinking that is a artistic graphic,
So
possibly.
just to clarify, this drawing represents what would be the 12-inch lettering that you guys typically approve.
Actually, we don't approve any signage.
Okay.
We just wanted you to address where you were going to propose signage for when you submitted to the sign committee.
Right.
So,
Okay, so it's showing that part of it, and then it does show this kind of graphic application that we've got a few details to work out. This right here represents what we think we'd likely apply for an exception on. Probably see the actual letters here. We think the graphic element would happen there, and then of course you'd see the tenant signage over here. This is closer to what we think in terms of this element, especially for closer to what the right proportion of signage might be. We're off the street. We know that's a different conversation with folks, but it does represent what our current thinking on signage is. Don't think we'd see this. This is our signage guy maybe proposing, but that's likely not something we do, knowing the limitations.
all right. All right, is that the end of your presentation?
Well, I would like to mention as well, a part, I think, of the last comments and maybe understandings with the city was that the application we have here for the outdoor floral apartment, I think there were some question marks about whether that was allowed and could we do it here. And this area is not a point of sale situation. It's simply a display, and it is under roof. And talking to Jaime last week, he felt that because it's under roof, it allows you to have that use of space out front, and we simply would propose either some sort of a sliding wrought iron application, an overhead door, but there's something at night that just closes the area off and keeps it secure. But during the day, you see that as part of the overall kind of under canopy, under roof display area. And there again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it's worthwhile to point out that the elements you see here, the height you see here, is a little higher than what we think our large piece of equipment would be, but it is somewhere in this range, and we do feel like the only real aesthetic way to solve the screening issue would be to go with something like this that gives us a higher parapet and does solve that screening. We'll have screening on the sides, both sides, and likely the back. But because of the placement of that unit, you're likely to see, in a lower element here, you'd see these guys popping up to to some degree.
You have a roof plan showing where the equipment's going to go?
Not
the
at this
roof?
point. We're not that far down in MEPs. I could show you generally on a fixture plan where that unit goes, but it usually, we don't nail that location until we get further into the MEP design process.
That's structural.
And structural, yes. Good point. We do have a fixture plan. I could give you a general location if you're interested. I think that fixture plan does also kind of, you see the very beginnings of it here, does lend itself to maybe a better understanding of what we do inside the space and why we're trying to line up some of these entrances and outside areas.
Did you want to
No.
just explain what is inside being brought out to the
Right.
outside?
And I think just as a design point, based on the comments, what we presented last time, what you guys saw, we did go back to the drawing board. We got Tom involved again, kind of pulled out all the stops, and wanted to kind of give you guys a kind of a feel for what we're doing here. So on the inside of the building, this is kind of a new approach for us, where we've really gone to a greater degree of design than we normally would. And we're incorporating what are some of these design themes on the inside of the store. And it's our desire to kind of have the connection, so to speak, a design connection with the stuff you'll see on the inside of the building, not these details specifically, but the feel, the materials, be reflected on the outside design. And so going back to the drawing board, trying to incorporate this stuff into the outside, the result is the elevation we were just looking at. It's that it's that contemporary interpretation,
Exactly.
so to speak, of that mission approach. But it's here. This was something the folks who put this together for us. This was one of their first stabs at an elevation. Nowhere near what obviously we're going to wind up with, but it was a result of trying to bring these elements to the outside. And then they went further to say, okay, here's some ideas about signage and really more about this graphic element you might see. And that's really what you'd see here is really just a graphic at the end of the day. And so there's been a real design process on our side to kind of bring the inside to a different point than we normally do in the store. This is really going to be a special store for us. And then work with you guys to bring some of those design elements out and make this a real reflection of what we're doing on the inside.
Just before we go into questions from the board or public comment, just a clarification from staff about the graphics. Doesn't the ABR or sign committee have limitations to murals type? Don't we have issues with murals, Tony, that we...
Let me see what the sign ordinance has to say about it, but I think we would just consider that to be a wall sign.
It would be part of the sign.
It'd be reviewed by the sign committee.
I want to make sure that we address it if we need to, and if we're not supposed to, we don't. That's what I...
That's sign committee's purview.
Okay, okay.
We did speak with Jaime on Wednesday about it, and we wouldn't consider it signage, and as it doesn't have lettering, it's more of a graphic, and it's
That's why I asked him if it was considered a mural and whether we should comment on it or whether sign committee should comment on it.
right. But as an architectural element, perhaps it's in your all's purview.
Perhaps it is. I just need to get clarification from you, Tony, before we spend time talking about it. So is that it?
I believe so. We'd like to hear your comments.
Okay. Do we have any public comment for this item? No? Tony, do we have any public comment? Any letters or anything? No? Okay. Questions from the board? How about you, Gary?
One would be, you mentioned that the cornice would be wood. Is that correct? Is that what you have in mind on that?
Well, wood finish, what we'd like to do is match the existing blue lands, which I believe are ponderosa pine or some version of that. But how we do it at this stage is not absolutely clear. But the general intent is to use real wood products where they will work and not be something that's an eyesore in 20 years. And also to tie into that overall wood aesthetic that's already there. as part of the existing facade.
Okay. I was looking at your sections right there. I'm not 100% clear on how that trellis element works. Does that stand completely proud, and how far proud does it stand from the entry facades?
When you say trellis, are you talking about the louvers?
I'm talking about that
This
element right there,
horizontal
that
element here?
horizontal line. How far proud is that
This
horizontal
piece
line?
here.
Yeah.
Right now, it's going to die right where this column. Sorry about that.
That's right.
It will die right where this column is. What we would be doing is matching it with a pull-through detail that gives us a support out here at the end.
And what is the horizontal element on that?
This,
This little piece that looks like a C.
yeah,
This
that
little
would
colored
be
gutter channels?
an integral gutter that would allow us to not have that draining off on the customers as a block underneath.
And that's an element we talked about that could perhaps break and follow the back and forth of the facade.
And right now, it's going to, it goes through the columns, correct?
So
The
there are
columns
no-
are
There are no
interrupted.
columns out here. This glue lamp is actually a cantilever that comes from pretty deep inside.
I think what
And
I'm
it-
kind of
and
talking
it's
about
supporting
is,
the entire, this entire canopy.
talking about here, this is coming through. Does this come around the columns at this point right here? Does this come through? How far proud is that from this?
It's showing one long line.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
This will die into this guy will die in between these two columns, and this is projecting out in front.
So these are projected out in front of these, just a one line that comes through these columns. Is that correct?
This section here, this is popping out in front of this. And this can actually all be in one line because this is set further back.
8 inches.
Right,
So-
the same here.
I think the dimension that you're after is probably 18 inches to 24
Yeah.
inches. You know, that it would project off the face of any of those new facades and even the existing roof element here.
And this is solid, or does it go back to the?
It's right here. The existing roof ends somewhere close to here. This 18-inch projection is what you're asking about right here from here to here.
Those existing projections become the structure, so to speak, for that
Okay.
new element to rest on.
Part of the problem is we don't have we're asking these questions because the drawings don't tell us what the information that we need.
Sure.
We don't have a line of existing roof, we don't have a line of new trellis.
Well, also these columns right here are at the same plane as these columns,
know.
Right.
but you're telling me that these ones are 8 inches back. So
Right.
I'm having this
Right.
Sure.
problem of
And
knowing
we
how
realize
the depth is.
that some of those details aren't quite fleshed out yet. This was simply, because of the comments we had from the last meeting, we did kind of go back, rethink the issues. We still have some thinking to do. We're looking to, get the comments you guys have and take that next step on design, probably define that stuff in a really more comprehensible way. But I think there's enough here, you get the general idea of what we're trying to achieve design-wise.
Any more questions, Gary?
Yeah, on the graphic right here, would this be a graphic that is going to change, or is it going to be a permanent type graphic? Is it going to be adhered to the plaster, or is there going to be something that's going to be proud from that?
We talked about it, and it's probably to be determined, but likely it's not something that changes with any regularity. And it's likely an element, we talked about maybe like a metal mesh that has a screen printing on it, but it's an architectural element that is attached to the building. Perhaps it has some lighting elements that define it at night. It's more about really the entrance point, but we think right now it's an architectural element that's affixed to the building, maybe a metal, something metal manufactured.
Okay, thanks.
Paul?
Just to clarify, there are two entrances and exits to the building, or is one primary and the other one is like the primary exit?
From a flow standpoint, you can see that with our picture plan. I'm sorry, we see this as our, let's call it primary entrance.
Okay.
Because it's associated with really how we flow through the building. This entry is more associated with the checkout lanes, which are on this side of the building. So we'd see folks entering here mostly and exiting here. Now,
Okay.
but the doors can go both ways. I mean, folks, will kind of change that up depending. If they were coming from this way, I could see somebody coming in here.
I gotcha.
The store flows that way, though.
The next question, you are actually widening the actual walkway, you're bringing this out?
We
further?
talked about it, and this is where we haven't quite figured all the details out, because right now what we're realizing is we would typically like to have a zero curb condition from, say, really the width of our store or a good part of it. We don't know that we can do that. Jose is working with the folks in traffic to get some of the details, but in the unlikely event that that can't happen, we're thinking we have a curb cut here, an apron here, curb cut here, an apron here, and because of those details, we can't allow the ADA compliant pedestrian traffic to flow in front of the columns. So the approach may be to bring these elements forward as far as we can and let traffic flow this way behind the columns and then get to the other tenant spaces over
But you
here.
haven't resolved that yet?
We haven't. It's an easy adjustment. It doesn't really affect to any great degree what you see here. It's just you'll see those elements.
It does affect it a lot, probably 4.5 feet.
If the columns come forward more, it does have a...
Well, from a strictly elevation standpoint, you wouldn't see much of a change. From a sectional standpoint, yeah, you would see the difference.
Okay.
It would allow us to have much more dimensional interplay between how far this is out and where this is.
Okay.
Right now, we're dealing with the ADA setback there that only allows us 8 to 10 inches, where if we move this forward, we would have much more flexibility to get plan variation to the elevation.
And to your question, as a maybe primary entry point, if this element was pulled forward, it may have a more of a statement about that primary entrance
Most
and,
definitely.
Okay.
and give that main signage field a place, a better place to live.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Kirk?
I just have one further question. And that is, last time it was mentioned that, by Tony, that this corner dining spot was possibly sent back. Is that correct?
The question was the front setback, and we determined that a outdoor patio seating can encroach into a front setback there.
Okay. That's my only question.
Stephanie? Thanks, Kirk.
The color scheme that you presented shows kind of 3 different colored stuccos, I see. Is that your intention?
Well, certainly 2. It is pretty prevalent, these 2 colors, the white stucco and the kind of off-white stucco. I think with the dimension of the barrel tile that we have, that could be this same color as well. But it's meant to give a foreground and background appearance to these elements, helping them stand out. I think if we move this architecture out in plan, it'll be even less necessary.
Yeah.
But we could certainly, for the next go-around, if your concern is we have too many colors on the building, we can certainly step that back to these 2.
I guess I'll
Questions?
save it for a comment. Save it for a comment.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Stephanie?
I just have one other question. So regarding the planting, so you're showing planting on the elevation, not on the plan, and then verbally you're representing that there probably won't be any planting. So why is the planting on the elevation?
We just haven't had a chance to make that revision. It just has been several moving parts trying to come together to meet with you guys today.
Okay, and one other question. This section looks like tile on this lower band. Is that
That's what
part of the plan?
we're seeing here. If you look very closely, there's a tile pattern on here in terracotta.
And that's
And the hopes is to get a good match to the terracotta on the roof tiles.
but in this case, it's on the building itself back here.
As a wainscot on the building, and then as a around each column.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
It's about lighting. Is there any proposed lighting fixtures on the exterior?
They don't have those specs right
There
now.
will be, but we don't have any specs on that right now.
There's that one section you did that had kind of a light detail on it. Don't want to confuse the issues. I think it might be right there. I thought that was not a bad iteration for something we might consider. It's an element we've seen in some other places around here, something along these lines. We haven't fully defined that as of
Pay
yet.
from
Yeah, that's right.
Any more questions, Stephanie?
No, Madam Chair.
I think I just had one. What was it? Oh, the last submittal, compared to the last submittal, the comment that we made was lower the parapet height significantly. What was the existing height? And what did you? How did you address that comment? So this one is 30 feet 8.
And this is 33.
So now you went higher here.
These and these are at,
This actually got higher
Right. And we,
these two
by 3 feet something.
got lower.
So this
This
one
is the
got.
existing parapet height here, and so
so this is
This
30
one is
feet
below.
8 here. You were 30 feet 8 in this element before.
So this got 2 feet lower. This got over 3 feet higher.
I guess if you want to look at three separate elements, you could say, yeah, compared to what you see as an element here, here, and here, yes, there was some change. However, as I mentioned before, the thought process behind that was that because of the screening requirement, which we now understand to be a requirement, I'm not sure that we were quite there before, where the equipment sits on the building, if you don't have this component here to some degree, we'll wind up with screening that's going to jut up and be close to the same height anyways to effectively screen that piece of equipment.
That brings me to my next question. This is kind of a section cut kind of through here because you're showing these two in the background. So it's kind of through here, this one is.
That's right.
So what you're saying is that you need this to be this, you're using the height as justification for your screening, but it's screening from, you know, the public right-of-way. It's not screening from an airplane flying over Milpa Street.
Right.
So
Well, sight lines are important, and they'll show us all the details. But sometimes when we're joking with people, we say that we're going to park a small bus on this building. We have our mechanical equipment includes a Seasons 4 unit. It's a whole house unit where it literally is. It's a fairly large piece of equipment, and it will have a height off of the existing roof line that will, at the end of the day, require some screening of this height range.
are you saying it's going to be this tall?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have a refrigeration rack up there as well.
Well, the refrigeration rack sits further back on the plan. This piece of equipment is kind of center to a little forward, typically.
So here's my question. Here's my approximate line of sight from Milpa Street, which is the farthest place anybody would be looking to, the farthest away. I mean, if you're close to the building, you're not going to see rooftop equipment that's even that big
No.
over the existing building. But let's say, for argument's sake, you're way out here on Milpa Street, way out, and you've got a line of sight that's huge. Your equipment would have to be 15, 20 feet tall in order to have to be screened by something that big.
15, 20, maybe not. To just give you a range, the equipment itself is 7 feet high, and it typically sits on a curb that's about 2 feet high. So you're 9 feet approximately in height. So from a strictly elevation standpoint, you would see the top of that unit above this line here.
I think if you've got a 9, well, I'll leave that to comments. Okay, that's all my questions.
So, but there again, that was the thinking behind leaving that as a higher element, was about screening. And also, I think there's a desire and intent to get a little visibility as well on this building. We are off the street a fair distance. We've got a lot of existing landscaping, foliage that kind of we know can't go away significantly. So we're trying to counteract some of those with kind of a double approach here, screening and also added visibility.
One of the other comments too.
Really quick, because we're in questions and we're behind by already 15
Okay.
minutes.
I just wanted
We have
to.
to make our comments.
I just wanted to add one comment to that. I know one of the statements last time we were here was kind of massing the Fresh Market entrances and the other tenant space, and what this also does, this iteration, is it kind of ties those two entrances together so that you can kind of see where Fresh Market is, the Fresh Market is, and where the other tenant space is. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, comments. Do you want to start, Stephanie?
Sure. First of all, to address the last comment, I disagree in that I feel like these two, looking similar in massing and size and color, and tend to make this look like those are the two entries that the two entrances for this store, not that. I would also like to start by saying I'm kind of disappointed in this direction that it's taken. I thought we were really close with the last design submittal, and we're encouraging you to define, the design that you had, or refine the design that you had. And this modern approach to this building and along Milpa Street, I don't think is the direction, a good direction for this building.
Why is that?
This facade looks very flat and kind of it's. I don't see the 8-inch difference in the planes enough to define them. This is a long, linear, flat face. It's very tall and does not serve a purpose other than to hide the equipment that we don't know anything about yet.
Well, we do as our
Actually,
spec,
no.
but we can get you more information.
Yeah, we're probably going to need a lot more information. But let's let her finish.
The wood cornice, I would not be in favor of. I'm very dubious of that. Looking good, and just the long lines, I think, accentuate the parts of this building that aren't necessarily attractive, and some of the more vertical and archway entries that you had in your previous submittal kind of softened that look. We're looking for some depth to this, for you to give some depth to this facade, and you seem to have flattened it out and made it longer and more linear, and almost eliminated the tile roof. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Stephanie. Kurt.
Well, I would say that in general, a sort of a merging of a contemporary style with a Mission or a Spanish style can work on this building. I think it takes some sophistication in design, and also careful study of massing elements and detail elements. So I don't really think this is there yet, but I'm not against it as an approach in general, and I think it might even be a good one on this building if it's done really well. But it has to be done really well. So we don't get to comment yet, so that's one comment. And then I am really disappointed in a number of things. One is that we have a floor plan that doesn't match the elevations necessarily. Yes, the column locations are shown, but there was discussion about there being differentiation between surfaces of the new elements, and yet on the floor plan there is none. So it puts us in a difficult situation. We can't approve. We can't give you positive comments on a drawing you've submitted when it's not representing what you're actually going to do. Same thing with the elevations. You're showing planting on the elevations that is not going to be there. So it puts us in a difficult spot. And this is one of our comments last time. In fact, it was with the first submittal. The plan needs to show what's there now and also what you're proposing. And if you're not proposing it, then it shouldn't be represented that way. So it's a very simple direction that we need in all the submittals that we receive. Otherwise, we can't really review it adequately. And then the parapet heights, there's another thing I'm disappointed on. So, even the existing parapet height went up from 24.6 to 26.8. It went up another 2 feet. So the direction, very clear direction that was given last
No, it
time.
went up to 30.
I'm talking about this one, this existing.
Oh, you
this
mean that one went up
yeah,
too?
Yeah. And now the rationale, the two rationales that I heard was, one, visibility for the building, and number two, to screen equipment. But if you're going to use the rationale of screening equipment, we need to see where the equipment is on the roof. We need a roof plan, and we need to see specs that show how tall that equipment is, and then we need to see sight lines to show that it would actually be visible. And so if I understand, we are concerned about visibility of equipment as well, very much so, and so we would want to see enclosures around that equipment, but I'm doubting that doing it with the front facade is the right way to do it. In fact, I'm almost certain that doing it with the front facade is not the right way to do it. It could be further back. It could be another location. I think what's happening back there is fine, and that maybe that's the answer for the other units that you're and other equipment that you're going to put on the roof. Is have more of those in select areas, but not. I don't know what that length is. 50-foot long parapet. The discussion Paul brought up about putting the columns proud of the path of travel, that would be a very desirable element, a massing element that would really help the plan, but it's not represented in the plan, so we can't really comment on it. And I agree with Stephanie that the top of the parapet, besides wood not being an appropriate element, also just the design of it is, in my view, not an appropriate way to try and merge these two styles that you're trying to do. And then also the other rationale about visibility, and unfortunately, as an architectural board, we can't hang our hat on that. We're looking at good architectural design, and just because you want to be seen from the street, that's not a good reason for us to approve it. I can understand that's an element in your thinking, but in our way of thinking, that's meaningless to us. Basically, we are just wanting a nice building, and if it's not appropriate in size or height or massing, then we have to ask for changes. And then again, in order for us to evaluate the architecture, we need you did provide some detail, suggestion of detail with the sections, but we need more of that. We need to see where those elements are projecting out on the plan and how far they're projecting out and where they're recessing in order to evaluate it architecturally, because those are really critical elements. Having it all be one long line or one flat plane just doesn't work. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Kurt. Paul?
First of all, I can tell you guys a lot of thought and thinking into each of these iterations. But I think you kind of, from my perspective, went backwards in the sense that what you had here versus where you are now is not going in the right direction. And I'm looking at the amount of vertical wall space and how high those parapets are. Have grown since the last time we've seen the project, and we were encouraging to bring it down, and instead we got more of a billboard. You've already heard it. The location of the equipment on your roof is important, and maybe you'll have a secondary screen around that equipment at that central location. Putting it at the front of the building just to make yourself taller so you're seen from Milpas isn't something that we're going to stand behind. And realize that once people have gone to your store once or twice, they'll remember where it is. And it's just that first time someone finding it, you don't have to have a really proud building. I mean, Scolari's, people came to it. I mean, you'll have business, and you don't have to have a big Home Depot billboard that's seen from the freeway. The concern, what I like about this project, and it's a positive, and design-wise, I see your challenges, and it has to do with your increasing the access in the front. You've got a really tight corner right here, and this curb cut that exists. And I look at the photographs and I stare at, I'm trying to, in my mind, figure out how wide this is. And there's a better picture, but I can't find it, between the red curb and the building and the activities that you're going to be putting in here. And then I see that a bad thing of the existing situation is this, wide sea of asphalt between the parking lot and what the building is. And the more that you can bring out a walkway, encouraging pedestrian activity, having your tables and chairs, that's all great positive things. And I don't know how much you can pull it out there, but I see this as being really tight here, coming across here, which is why I was asking these questions. Then if you have a zero curb line, we've got those stupid little bumps we have to live with, and then you're going to have all the bumps, and then hopefully you can have a 3-foot wide or 44-inch walkway between the bumps and the building, so people, there's design issues that get triggered, but you have something great that you're working on, but it's also very tight and confining. So I kind of, when you come back and you think about this, how you're addressing this corner with how much room you have to work. What I liked about your old design, it had like a Bennigan's restaurant feel to me. It was kind of fun and happy, and you can just see activity and a buzz. This is pretty stark. It doesn't have as much flavor and color, but definitely losing this roof, having that big, huge parapet.
Wait, clarification, that's the existing roof.
No. You lost this roof by putting this parapet in front of it. This awnings here based upon your section, so that the rain that gets onto here, the louvers, it's wrong. It's not looking like a sound building solution. So you've got a challenging building because the scale is so large, but it's also a great opportunity to humanize it.
Thanks, Paul. Gary.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd agree with pretty much all the comments that were said, so I won't reiterate most of them. But one thing that bothers me the most is how the columns are broken up by that linear line on this, and I think that's a bad point. I'm also the geometry of the building, of how square this is, where we had a little bit of Spanish design towards it on this drawing, we lost a lot of that. So I think that as Paul said, we did go step backwards on this. And I'd like to see a little bit more towards the Spanish design and maybe visit some of the better buildings on Milpa Street that show some of that character. But this definitely is not working for me, especially with just an 8-inch or 12-inch standing proud just in front of the columns. Doesn't work for me at all. I'm really concerned about this, as everyone is, but I'm more concerned about your graphic. There's one thing about Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara, in the late 60s, said no more billboards. There are no billboards in town. We don't have any. You can't drive around. You don't see billboards. And to me, this is a billboard. When you go up there and you put a picture, and you're putting a picture of a fruit, and you're saying this is the fresh market with a billboard on it. And this type of graphic is something that we've gone away from a long time ago. And to bring it back, it's really not Santa Barbara. This type of architecture, as you say, or type of design in a situation like this is not in character with anything that we have in Santa Barbara. And I, for one, although nobody has mentioned anything about this, I, for one, would be very strongly opposed to this type of design that's going to be on the building.
I just don't think it's allowed.
Well, regardless of whether it's allowed, whether it's allowed on the sign department or not, I think that this isn't allowed as an architectural element, if it's proposed as an architectural element.
That's why I wanted clarification from staff on whether or not we should even be talking about it. So, thank you for your comment.
And if you come back and you say it's an element and we're going to put screening on it, but the screening's going to end up looking like it's still going to end up looking like a billboard, but a little more modern, I just don't think it's something that will work on the exterior of the building. It's fine in the interior of the building, but on the exterior of the building, for me, it wouldn't be something that I would look forward to. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I agree with a lot of the other comments. I agree with the wood comments that were here and so forth.
Okay, I'm going to make mine hopefully really quick. I agree with everything that's been said, but I think the biggest thing is that I think I'm the one that brought up last time about how grossly out of proportion the proposal is. And I said it last time, and then it got bigger still. It didn't get smaller. And I think that if you looked at this drawing and if it was a 1/4-inch scale, then you're on the right track. But you're doubling that. This is an 1/8-inch scale drawing, and I think that if this...
No.
Yeah, 1/8-inch scale.
Did you change that scale?
No, he didn't, and it's exactly right. And this is right. That's how much I think you're not in tune to how big this facade that you're proposing is going to look. Because if you look at this building, and if anybody has ever been to Scolari's knows, when you come up to the front of this building, it's a big building already. It's a really tall building already. So what you're proposing, if I drew this over this, it would be that tall. You're doubling the height. Here, this line here is the existing facade. You're doubling it. So here's a person way down here. You're talking about a 3-story building in one plane right in front of you. So I think that's what Paul might have been
It's
talking
not quite the scale, but I understand.
It's
I mean,
pretty close.
It's kind of halfway between 1/8 and 1/4.
Do you understand what I'm saying? 'Cause
We understand.
okay, so I think that if
Here,
even if
let's-
all the
let's
hold on,
go
I'm not
back.
done. I'm not done. I'm not. If I feel like I'm repeating myself from 2 weeks ago, but if everybody else seemed to be okay with it, and we asked for story polls, and they went up, I mean, it would be a shock to everybody about how huge this building is proposed to be. If you drew this in 3 dimensions, like I said, if this were drawn at 1/4-inch, I would say you're on the right track. In fact, if you, in the last submittal, had submitted something that was an element like this and an element like that without any of this up above it, and these little elements just penetrated and came up above the existing tile roof as entry elements so you could define your entry, I think that would have been a really great approach. But you're doubling the height of the front of this building. And I don't think the front of this building should be any higher than it already is. So I think that maybe I tried to be in the minutes last week because the motion was made, and I tried to come back and make sure that we wrote the word significantly. You guys heard me. Significantly reduce the parapet, and you not only didn't significantly reduce it, you raised it. So I don't think a lot of thought, I don't agree with whoever said that a lot of thought has gone into this because we don't have complete drawings. We don't have a proposal that we can even comment on. We spent the entire time asking questions about what you're proposing, what you're not proposing. You know, these are shown to be popped out, but this one looks like it could never die into that, and it's because we can't read what you're proposing and what's new and what's existing. So, but aside from all the discrepancies in the drawings and lack of information and lack of landscaping and lack of detailing, on top of all that, the biggest thing is still, I think you're double the size that you should be on this, and that's what I'm being really careful about how strongly I make that statement this time because I don't think that got through last time. So that's my comment.
Is there a height restriction in the city?
It's irrelevant. There is, but it's irrelevant in this case because it has to do with the appropriateness of the architecture that everybody's been talking about and human scale. And
It's really pedestrian scale because you park your car and you're walking to the building, and this is what you perceive, and that's what we're focusing on. It's not pulling a person from Milpas while they're driving, going, "Oh, there's the store."
it's
Let's
not
turn in."
allowing you to build a building to the height limit.
It's just in addition to our guidelines, we have rules that go towards the architecture, what style of architecture, human scale. There's
The
a
maximum,
lot
but
of
they're not based on the
parameters.
architecture.
Yes.
So anyway, I think that I'm going to be not voting in favor of this project if some really strong language isn't made in the motion to significantly decrease the height of the front facade. Those are my comments, unfortunately. So I need, if you have something really, really quick that you want to say, we're already over a half hour behind, but go ahead.
Well, I think in general, I mean, apologize, we maybe didn't meet all of the expectations. We have, despite your impression, put a lot of thought into this, and there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things we're trying to make work from a retail standpoint, a architectural design, aesthetic standpoint. So maybe not quite there yet, but the idea was to present a slightly different approach in terms of aesthetic, at least get some general input there, knowing maybe we hadn't addressed all those concerns, and then come back to you with that altered.
Well, I, for one, am not opposed to a more contemporary approach to Spanish architecture. I think that would be refreshing, but yeah, I think you have bigger problems.
Okay, well, that's a step forward for us.
But you didn't listen last time, we said. Anyway, go ahead.
So I'll make an attempt at a motion. I won't reread these, but maybe I will actually.
I circled the ones that weren't
Yeah,
addressed.
yeah. So number 2, lower the parapet heights significantly. We can carry that forward. Number 3, which said restudy the main entrance facade design to provide more architectural definition, not a single flat facade. That can be carried forward. Number 5, we will want new section cuts through the entrance, through the proposed entrance canopy portions. So we're, proposed entrance canopy portions. Number 6, provide design details for columns, parapet caps, and cornices. And number 9, provide a larger scale drawing noting the existing and proposed. Accurately noting, let's add that, accurately noting the existing and proposed.
And number 10.
Yeah, and number 10, provide increased landscaping wherever possible. And then I think we'll add that some board members feel that a fusion of a contemporary style with Spanish style is feasible, but that it's not working here. We're not seeing a working design at the moment. And just to underline, the current resolution of the parapet cap is not acceptable as indicated, as shown. If part of the rationale for the design involves screening of rooftop units, then we need to see a roof plan that shows the location of those units and how tall they are, a specification, a spec that shows how tall they actually will be when constructed. The floor plans need to match the elevations and vice versa. Large-scale signage should not be indicated on the plan at all, unless it's an architectural element.
Thanks.
To add to that?
Can somebody second the motion before discussion?
I can second that.
Okay, Paul, second it. Under discussion?
Just one item. Usually if a project's been at the board 3 or 4 times, it can be optioned that you can take a denial and that you can take it to the city council, because if you're not hearing what the board is suggesting, we're not verbalizing it well, there is a recourse. You don't always have to do what ABR says, but from the perspective of the board members, this is what we're saying, and you're coming back for the 4th time with the design. So I would say we would expect to see some movement in the direction of these minutes or the motion. But if you don't have to, there's always a recourse.
Yeah, what he's saying is you don't have to agree with us. If you feel really strongly that you want a 30-foot high front facade and you're not willing to compromise on it, which is kind of the sense that I'm getting after seeing this for the 3rd time, then you can choose to get a denial and it would go on to appeal to city council.
Understood. Just
Just
as,
our
as a
opinion.
clarification, the drawing you're looking for that shows what's there now and what we're proposing, is that an overlay? I mean, what's the
Just
best way to
very
present
simple,
that?
a drawing that shows what's existing, what's proposed, in one drawing, or two, existing and proposed.
No, it
Either-
doesn't have, if I may
Yeah,
interject, it doesn't have to show everything that's existing, but, for example, on this drawing, I'm guessing that this is the existing line of the existing parapet, but it's not called out anywhere.
Right.
It says canopy. Well, is that the new canopy, the existing canopy, and so on? And then we saw another plan that showed planting out here, existing planting, but there's no indication on this plan where that existing planting occurs.
Right.
So if it was just even dashed in, a curb line that shows where existing curb is and where the new proposed one is. Just some dashes so we can see
Okay.
what the
That's
changes
what I
are to
was
be
after.
made.
we need
Yeah.
to know what's going on. We need to know what you're doing.
Yeah,
And if you can't-
in a different poche, perhaps, when showing the different planes that are, proud of one another.
Sure, I
Like if
understand.
there's overhangs that are proud of one another, dash them in.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Excuse me,
Oh.
one clarification for one of the points you made, Kirk, regarding, there was a second comment about the parapet being not acceptable. Is that the treatment of the edge of it? Because we had an earlier comment about the height.
That's two different things,
Both.
and they're both true.
Yeah.
So
It's
you
the
were,
treatment of the detail treatment of the cap.
Okay,
is not
thank you.
acceptable.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Sorry about that, you guys.
We,
I think
those are copies.
there's
Some of
one
them
that
are.
isn't. That one right there that's got the red ink on it.
Oh, so the red actually came as a copy.
The only problem is we have to
Is
keep
that a
these.
copy?
You worked that out with Tony, because we have to move on, because we're so far behind. We're almost an hour behind.
Did you do a color copy?
I did.
But
that's fine.
maybe he can make a copy for you, so we can keep one of them, a copy in our file.
You okay with it? You can just keep those.
Item number 2, 1924 Cliff Drive. It's a sign application review after final coming from the conforming sign committee for Chase Bank. This is an exception request to allow off-premise signage for Chase Bank to be relocated on the existing McDonald's monument sign. It's referred from the sign consent calendar, actually, because the request wasn't supported by the sign committee in a concept review. Do you have anything to say before the applicant makes their presentation, Tony?
I'll have some comments, but you can make the presentation.
Okay. Go ahead, your name for the record.
Ken Sorgman, Signs by Ken.
Randy Ziegler with Scientific.
So, I think basically the thing in question is whether or not this is off-site signing. So I have a letter here that I'm going to read, if you don't mind, from Peter Goodell. He's represents the owner, Levon Investments. I'll skip over just the beginning of it here. It's not that relevant, but in all dealings with the city of Santa Barbara, the entire Mesa Center has been treated as one planning entity. This is applied to landscaping, parking, count, traffic calculations, and uniformity of design. In this one case, the sign committee felt it was appropriate to consider this monument sign to be an off-site signage issue. We are not in agreement with this sign as off-site. While in the distant past, this corner parcel may have had divergent usage from the remainder of the Mesa Center due to the remodel and based on traffic flow, appearances, and general perception, the two parcels are currently considered the Mesa Center. In considering the approval of the monument signage for Chase Bank, please note that this issue has full ownership approval.
Okay, Ken, you want to just
So-
tell us, everybody, what's going on?
So basically, two signs were approved for the bank. I don't know if that is necessarily here, but I do have that. directly on the building itself, one facing Cliff Drive, the other one facing Meigs. Here we go. And there were some adjustments in the size of the sign on Meigs down to 12-inch, I believe. So some of the concern,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. So this monument sign, I think you can see it in the photos, but basically existing
Isn't it
at
right
the
here?
corner. Yes, it's probably a little bit better. There we go. It's a little closer photo, and then here's what was proposed, is to add Chase underneath McDonald's.
That's a merger.
Corporate merger.
Okay, and that's the whole proposal, right?
Correct, right.
Now, I should read before we go into public comment if there is any. This is their letter justifying why they think the exception should be granted. Their argument was already that they didn't feel that it was a separate site, right?
Right.
And then, oh, you already read this.
I guess that was
think
contained within
it was
there?
contained within it.
Within that, okay.
Here's, I don't know if you read this, if you mentioned this part of it, Ken. It would seem logical, this is a letter from them, from Ken Sargman. It would seem logical to to also include all sites when analyzing the sign program. Under this assumption, adding do you guys want to hear this part? Under this assumption, adding an additional sign at the existing monument would not be considered off-site. He already mentioned that. And another important factor that underscores the need for additional signage is the location of this tenant space relative to the other businesses in the shopping center. This section of the center is stepped back 25 feet, additional 25 feet, and is also partially blocked from view by the current McDonald's restaurant. This adversely affects the visibility of Chase Bank from Cliff Drive. The city has allowed other sign exceptions throughout the site, as it has recognized the physical constraints of the site and the challenges that the older shopping center presents. We hope the city will recognize these visibility issues and the challenges. That's a paraphrase of the letter. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I mean, there was some points made about traffic flow and coming into the parking lot from there, from Cliff Drive, that you really couldn't see the bank that legibly, but I think that was discounted.
By the sign committee.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Tony, any letters? Anything?
Put that under the camera.
This is Chase.
Yeah, that aerial photograph, the red lines I drew on there show the property lines, and McDonald's parcel is a separate parcel, not part of the Mesa Center sign program, and it's separate ownership owned by McDonald's Corporation. And the
Everybody
Mesa
understand?
Center has two ground signs. You can see how they're located to identify the Mesa Center. We do combine those two parcels together in terms of the parking calculation. They have a shared parking agreement, so for the total parking for the whole complex, we use both.
Okay.
And I provided some pictures, street views showing the Mesa Center signs in relation to the McDonald's.
Those are helpful, thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Questions? Stephanie, do you have any questions?
Have any other monuments or locations for the sign been looked for?
No.
No.
You're not going to need monuments?
Like it wants to be, the owner wants it to be off of Cliff Drive or Cliff or Korea Hill, or what is that, Meigs Road?
It was an agreement made with McDonald's when they were doing the lease, so that was part of the intent.
No.
We can come back if you do.
Okay.
Kirk?
So I just want to, in the form of a question, kind of point out that, as you well know, there's two other opportunities for ground-based sign at the entrance. I mean, you can't see it on the screen, that's fine. So I just wanted to point out that there is there's planters on both sides of the entrance along the Cliff Drive portion, or Cliff Drive entrance.
It's Cliff.
No, this is Cliff. This is Cliff, and there's Chase back here. This is the Chase building back here. And this
Oh,
is-
no, he's
Meg's
right.
Road.
This is Meg's Road. Right, this one is. This one is also Meg's
Oh,
Road.
they're both mixed.
Yes.
We have a Cliff Drive.
There's the other one. There's
Okay.
two. One on Meg's and one on Cliff.
So, same deal. There's planters on both sides of the entrances, and just wondering why other locations haven't been sought, because so that's one question.
Well, there really isn't very much room on those planter walls at all. As it is now, the lettering is pretty low on the wall. I don't know if you can see it that well here, but so it really wouldn't have much effect, visibility at all.
Well, I'm not saying on the wall
Yeah.
itself
Oh.
necessarily, but in those planters, surrounding planters, you can have another sign.
The thought was that, this would be a cleaner approach, since this monument was existing already,
So then that's my second
rather than
question.
adding another monument.
I guess that's my other question is, did you consider adding, if you wanted to have a corner sign, there is a sizable planter there, that you could have another monument?
It would still be an off-site.
Okay.
It would still be the same issue.
But-
Is it at the very corner sign, or is it the corners, is it the one on Cliff?
It's the same one.
On
It's
Cliff?
this one.
It's only
Yeah.
one? Because I thought there was one there, but maybe not. Maybe I'm seeing that one where you did the graphic of the two. Yeah, so that's on the corner.
That's that one. Paul, questions?
Was the exception for the 16-inch sign, was that approved by the sign committee, or was that done at conforming?
Oh, no, it was on,
What 16-inch?
The 16-inch,
The other one on the building?
yeah.
The other parts of the application were supported. It was this particular part of the application that was not supported by one person out of the two people on the sign committee,
Okay.
if I remember right,
That's right. It was reviewed at the sign consent calendar.
which is two people.
Which is two people?
And staff provided this memo to the ABR giving you some of the case history, and Chase did improve their signage visibility with this application, with the 16-inch letters, an exception being approved, that this new Chase Bank is set back 164 feet from the curb on Cliff Drive. And for comparison, there's a Chase Bank in Loretto Plaza where the Gelson's is that was approved with 12-inch letters, and it's set back 340-some feet with 12-inch letters, and this one, got 16-inch letters approved. They also introduced a new sign to the sign program, the wall sign facing Meigs Road that wasn't there before for previous tenants. That was because Chase Bank combined, I think, 3 tenant spaces into one larger
Right.
tenant space. It's sort of a new anchor for
Okay.
the tenant. But we just ask you to consider carefully this sort of an exception. We're concerned about setting a precedent for others who might want to put an off-site sign at a busy street corner intersection.
Thank you.
Gary?
Yes, are there anyone else in the Mesa Center that has a monument sign
no.
other than McDonald's? Albertsons?
No.
Santa Barbara Bank? And is there anybody else's name underneath the Mesa Center sign, the monument sign?
No.
Okay. That's my only question.
Okay, comments. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's acceptable. I don't think it's fair to other tenants. I don't think it's something that we want to add. I don't think we want to start adding monument signs that have all of the tenants that are in a center, and that's why they each have their own identity, and that's why they each have their own sign. And an anchor sign has a larger sign, a larger prominence than some of the other tenants. So I think what they have is fair, and what they're asking for is a little bit above, and I'll be one that is not in favor of adding the signage underneath the McDonald's sign.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Paul?
I'll agree. I don't have any other comments different.
Stephanie, I don't have any different comments. Okay. I think I was probably the one that was okay with it. And the reason that I was is because to me it looked like the McDonald's existing monument sign was probably too tall, and that this actually helped it by adding, and I didn't see it as a big deal. And I wouldn't even be opposed, dare I say, Bob Cunningham will be cringing if he's watching this, but I wouldn't even be opposed to the major anchored spaces of this center having a spot on a sign that I think has got room for a couple of spaces, but I stand as the minority in this group. So that's my comment.
I'll make a motion denying the application for off-site signage for Chase Bank.
Second.
Under discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Madam Chair, under clarification, is it a denial, or we're just saying it's not approved, not approvable as submitted?
I think that because of the nature of the application, of it actually just being the sign on there, that there's really no room for,
They didn't give an...
it's not an issue of changing the size of it on the existing monument. You're looking for a yes or no, right, Ken? Mm-hmm. Okay.
But in saying no, are we denying? So I'm just worried about the clarification in terms of what the
I think the
words being
applicant
used.
would want something clean cut, like a denial. And Paul, could you please state why, the reasons why?
Before we vote, under discussion.
Let's get that into the minutes in case this, in case this is
It
appealed
would
to the
be-
city council.
The reason would be just starting a precedent for non-anchors having secondary signage under someone else's sign on an off-site signage.
It is an anchor tenant, though.
I would say that it would be that there are no tenant signs on monument signs on this property, period.
Is that good enough?
And
Ken?
the only monument sign that has a tenant on is on a separate parcel. And the parcel that they're wanting is not even on the same parcel as the property. So it becomes a billboard almost when you put something on a separate property. So I would say that it doesn't seem to be in conjunction with the sign ordinance.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. There you go, Ken.
Good. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 3, 131 Anacapa Street. I have to step down for this. Is this the one I have to step down for? No.
No.
131 Anacapa. Yeah. Thank you for your comment. Let's see, there's a billboard I saw. This is more of a directory sign. Not a billboard. Billboard is billboard. I think billboard is like
Directory
striped.
signs need an exception too.
Okay. Oh, I don't want any signage. Okay, so this is a review after final for a revision to the front entry trellis at Building B, revised patio fencing, lighting on buildings B and C, paving on Building B patios, electrical enclosure on Building A, and mechanical wells. Do you want to just go through? Clay, name for the record.
Name for the record, then I have a quick question. How is this different than what was seen at consent 2 weeks ago? You go explain that.
So I'm Clay Arell with AB Design Studio, architect for the project. At consent was just a door change, is what we brought forth. Was the changing of the doors on the restaurant portion of the building, which is here. There's a lot of reasons why we did it this way, but there's other changes happening out here now for more of the site. So we're not really focusing on those doors that we did at consent, but we have paving changes and all sorts of things.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay, great. Apologize that these are not stapled. They're hot off the press. I'm going to go through, this is the existing site plan, which for the moment probably isn't of importance. I'm gonna lay out, I'm just going to kind of go through this real quickly, and then we'll have detailed areas of the site that we can talk about. And Tony, do you have the approved set? I'm sure that question will come up, so maybe we can have that out as well. Just a background for those of you who weren't on the board when this project came through, this is the old Bay Cafe site. Restaurant used to be here. There's 3 buildings. We've labeled them Building A, B, and C. And the reason for coming back to you are several. One, we're in construction, and some things have had to change because of construction and opening up the building and finding some things out. We have some tenants that have come in the buildings now. There's several tenants in this front building. We have a restaurant tenant here. That has instigated some rethinking of this sort of central courtyard space and how this area works. The restaurant tenant is actually taking this portion of the building, including back here and that little building. So that, in the process of dealing with that tenant, they've wanted to actually rethink how this was originally laid out and approved. When it was originally laid out and approved back in March of this year, we had no tenants. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just getting it ready. So I will go through these as quickly as possible. Actually, let me get back to this. As many of you will remember, we had a series of these gabions, which are these steel cages with debris. Like, some of these are actually construction debris. Some of them are wine bottles. Those are still staying. The design is more or less the same. We've actually added more landscaping, which is a good thing. We've taken away some hardscaping, which is a good thing. And we've used the elements are still the same. They've just been shifted around a little bit to create some private patios for the restaurant, as well as ABC enclosures and things like that we need to deal with. So that's really the impetus for these changes. Nothing has changed along this side here. This is all relative. This is all the same as was originally approved, as well as this, and as well as all the parking field. So really, the changes that we've done go from this facade to that facade, edge of the parking lot to here, and through here and around the corner. And really, like I said, it's a shuffling of materials. We've got some planter boxes in the front now. We have some fencing along here to create a private dining experience, as well as ABC enclosure. We've added a low fencing along here, some additional plantings and planters here. This tree, I think, was relocated, shifted over. We're adding more plantings along this facades. The trellis that was originally here is more or less in the same location. It just got a little bit wider in that direction. We'll go through some of these. On this sheet, this is kind of the central court. So I'm just going to kind of point out things that are changing and things that are staying so you get the sense of it. This is exactly as what was approved. So is this Gavion and all the bike parking. This is a new Gavion. So we've actually turned the corner because this is going to be a tenant that needs an ABC enclosure as well. This is an access point for another tenant that's going in here, so that's why that's kind of sectioned off. These are all large planters, so whereas these were planters originally approved, they've just sort of changed dimension. We've added a tree. This is new, as well as some fire pits out here for the restaurant dining. Nothing's changed over here. We've actually had to add, based on the way our utilities are coming in, we needed an enclosure here, so we've designed an addition to this building, which you'll see on the elevations. Trash enclosure had to move a little bit based on plan check corrections, so that's a change from what was originally approved at ABR. Missing anything else on this sheet? We've pulled out concrete and put pavers in here. The rest of this is all concrete, which was originally approved. This is all concrete originally approved.
Can you, since this is building A, electrical and mechanical?
That's this right here. And then we have these elements that come over the roof that screen the mechanical. We've had to make them larger based on tenant needs. And we'll go to those too. So here's the front trellis that you see from the front of the old Bay Cafe restaurant here. So the trellis has actually broken up into a little bit different format, but it's largely it's the same material. It's changed shape a bit. This is the front fencing, which there was no change to that. Here's a courtyard elevation looking back at building B, again showing the gabions and the planters and the plantings, the new tree. Here's some of the fence material, so that's changed from what was previously approved. Here's, again, looking at the parking lot side of the building B, where we have some of that fencing wrapping the corner, and then it drops down to a lower height along here for ABC enclosure. And then the trellis is here. And it's basically a steel trellis, so like we had before with wood slat across the top. I want to come back to, so a lot of these drawings are drawings that you saw before. I don't expect you to remember all the details, so so a lot of these details come out. We've simplified the trellis. It's still tube steel box framed with these large planks on the top, and that integrates with...
Any kind of netting or something, or that's open air?
It's open air.
And how close were these before, or what was there before?
Yeah, there was more 2x materials, and they were spread out and a little bit more broken up. So we've gone a little bit more open because this is the northeast side of the building. So we wanted to open it up a little bit more, and then these help support with lighting and things out here for seating under the patio. So really, the design's fairly similar. It's just simplified up a little bit on the wood elements. A couple things that have shifted on this plan that are different from what you saw is this. There's that enclosure here. We've changed some of the swings of some of these doors. This door actually was here. It had to locate here so we can get our ADA slopes to work. That's pretty benign at this point. On the roof, this is the roof of Building A. So here's that enclosure. I'll show you that in elevation. This is the equipment wells that are up here. They were originally about this long, and we've extended them out because we needed more mechanical space to service the tenants that are currently coming in the building, which go from here to here. This is left open, so we've made this one longer just in case, because we're anticipating that somebody might come in and need additional mechanical. But this is all screened, and you can't see that from the street. Here's an elevation of it. Again, this is what was approved. These had to slide over a little bit from what was approved, and then they got longer in that direction, which you see on the Anacapa elevation. So whereas they were once here, roughly here, they've now gotten a little bit bigger to accommodate mechanical, so we can screen it all. Here's the electrical enclosure on the,
West.
thank you, the west side of the property. Originally, what was approved was a bunch of switchgear just sitting outside exposed, and with this patio and some alterations in the service that we needed to get larger, we decided to go ahead and do an enclosure. And we're going with a Corten steel. This could be used for signage or something like that for the tenant. And we have the palette of the project is rusted steel, Corten steel, corrugated steel, brick, CMU, concrete. This whole building is all CMU. These lighting locations shifted over a little bit. Those are kind of minor. Here's a section through one of those wells on the roof for the mechanical. So this is the additional space that we needed for the tenants that are currently going in the building. A couple doors and window changes. Again, most of this is just kind of recording what we've been doing. So here we're at Building B, and what's changed, we came back, we were in here a couple weeks ago on consent for a different window or door style here for the tenants. We've added this little door here, made the change per your comment, Paul. This changed from what we had originally as well. We actually need this as an egress point, so we've got a little alcove recess. This is adding some skylights on this back building here. These are existing skylights. These would be new. From an elevation standpoint, this was the old Bay Cafe, and then this is what we just came in and changed these doors out for the tenant. And this is that alcove that you see here. That'll be brick on the interior of it. And then we infilled these doors. Or that's actually the alcove. That's the door being infilled. Again, the doors have changed per the tenant's requests, and largely the rest of this is the same. This little building we call Building C. It used to be the old ice house or ice box for the fish market. It's had some changes to the windows. The door is more or less the same, but the windows have changed the location of them. This is what it used to look like. We've pulled that eyebrow off, a little tile eyebrow. We've pulled that thing off, and we're really just simplifying the building. I want to come back and talk about Building C in a minute, because there's a couple things we're exploring on that. And then landscaping, there's a lot of things here. It's kind of hard to digest all at once, but I'll just walk you through. The paving material hasn't changed, but mostly the patterning has. So this is all, as I mentioned, this is all largely the same. This is all the same over here. That gabion shifted. This went to permeable. This is existing concrete. This is going to be new concrete with some scoring lines. And then there's the new trellis and the planter boxes and the new tree. And there's new planting here. We've actually lined the edge of the parking lot from the ADA enclosure is all plantings now. So there's plantings here, planter boxes, plantings all along here and all along there. So that's been a nice change to the project. I'm sure you guys want to look at all the plants. You want to go through all the plants? So one of the things, I know Chris isn't here today. So just on a conceptual level, I wanted to show you some of the items here, some of the renderings that we have on the project. So here you can see this is the CMU building, or Building A. These have gotten a little bit longer to accommodate the equipment. This hasn't changed it here at all. This is the Building C. which we've added some lights and changed the windows. These are the new planter boxes that are the same as what we were using before. They're just in different locations. But they're large rust Corten steel boxes, and then this low low fence here with the trellis members. There's a trellis member and then a light bollard and then a trellis member. This is kind of the main entry here. Again, planter boxes flanking that entry access aisle from Anacapa. And then this fence comes along here, and then it jumps up to a little bit taller to kind of create a nice private dining area in there. I'll come back to this in 1 second. This is all building C here? Or is there more? Okay. So here's another view just across the parking lot. This is the truncated domes. This is looking at the fence and the materials. Again, here's some colored elevations just to kind of see the different materials. That's an existing brick panel in the building that we're keeping.
That's on the building the same plane as that gray. Same plane?
No, this is back about 20 feet.
It's the same plane as
Same
that.
plane as this.
Okay, same plane as that.
Yeah, exactly. Most of this building, the big warehouse, is all concrete frame with brick infill, and then there's brick on this, and that wraps that corner, Paul, and that's where that panel is. And then it goes to concrete frame and doors. Here's that interior court elevation. And then, let's see, one of the things that we're looking at doing is painting out the concrete elements on here in kind of a dark graphite color to kind of, it helps make some of these items pop, and it's desire of the owner to kind of give it a little bit of color. And last thing I want to talk about, because I'm sure you're going to have tons of questions, but on building C, which is the little building, we didn't have this in the plans. It's kind of a new idea with the owner on what to do with this little building. Everybody kind of wants to turn it into something. And what we've proposed in the drawings here is to just clean up the building with plaster and paint it kind of the graphite gray color. New windows along here. They would have some awnings and some new lighting across there. One of the ideas that's been floated this week is to actually wrap the building with pennies. So we've done kind of a little mock-up of what that could look like, is to let this, everyone's been, in terms of the client, the owner, everyone we've been talking about this is the little jewel box on the site and what to do with it. So there's been lots of exploration on that. But one of the ideas that came up was to wrap it in pennies. So we wanted to bring it as a, get your guys' temperature on that and see what you thought about it, because it's kind of unique. It's a unique thought. Did I miss anything? No. I'm sure you're going to have tons of questions, so I'll complete.
All right. Any public comment on this item? All right, none. Questions from the board? Who wants to start? Who has a question? I'll start.
You said something, kept saying ABC enclosure? ABC? is that
Alcoholic
what-
beverage control.
That's what I thought. it
Restaurant.
meant. I was just,
Yeah.
so we call it back east.
Sorry.
I haven't heard it out here. The brick that you're proposing, is it, you're going to sandblast it, treat it how? Is it existing
It's all
brick?
existing.
So you're going to sandblast it? So it's all the same, or not treated at all? Or?
We're just going to leave it.
Okay. And any new brick? Is there any new brick proposed in that little enclosure area that you were talking about, the vestibule?
That would be on the inside. It'll be a brick veneer to match as close as we can.
And did you consider brick
looking for
for
the elevation?
the building C at all?
I'm sorry?
Because when I first saw your little rendering there,
Site plan? I'm sorry.
when I first saw your rendering, I thought that was a brick material being proposed, but you said it was pennies.
Right.
But have you thought of any other materials for that besides pennies?
Been around and around, and that's one that seems to stick with the tenants and the owners at the moment. But
And how would that be detailed?
how would we stick the pennies?
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
I don't know.
Any other questions?
No.
Hot glue gun,
Kirk?
maybe. Probably not.
I wasn't here for the last review, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to review the videotapes or the previous plans. Can you just review the gabion detail? What that is?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Where's the?
Is it on the plan?
Where's the rendering package? Gabion is simply a steel frame with angles and wire mesh in between. So you've got angles all the way around, and then you've got a steel mesh, and then you fill it with whatever you want. In this case, we've chosen in a couple of these is wine bottles, old wine bottles, because we have several wine-based tenants going in here, in addition to the restaurant. And then on a couple of them, we've gone with construction debris, so it ends up having kind of a repurposed effect, if you will.
Okay. Was this cantilever also part of the original approval, or is that a change?
That's the fun of an elevation. That's something way in the background. That's you're actually seeing different trellis. There's a. Let me go to the other page. There's a trellis frame here. This is going to be a private dining spot.
see.
So you're seeing it's cut off, but you're seeing that in elevation beyond. So you're looking down this line here, and then that's coming way out here, and you're not seeing that post.
Okay.
It's just, one of the things you deal with elevation.
And then, in terms of what's facing the street for Building C, can you give us a clearer idea of how visible that the finishes on that building would be, other than through the parking lot this way? The straight-on elevation
We
of that?
have a 6-foot fence here with enclosing the trash. So
Okay.
this building goes up to, I think, 12 feet no, it goes a little higher than that. About 12 or 13 feet. So you'll be able to see it from the street. Yeah.
Okay.
And most of the time, actually, it was required that these gates be open during normal business hours. So it will be visible through there as well.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Paul,
I
thanks.
just want to compare the two elevations.
Sure. This one?
Yeah. This one.
Site.
Yeah. And Kirk, even though you weren't here for it, you can make it, your opinion would matter. It can be included. This is what was proposed originally, and this is where we're at. Am I right?
This was what was approved in March, and this is what we're now coming forward with. So these were all steel.
It was a metal. It was always metal, but
It was
now
steel.
now the frame is like a rigid frame, welded.
Right. And then what I also want to point out to the other board members is this was the look that was actually on the top, and now it's those slats.
Right.
On
Two slats. Here it is right here.
Yeah. So.
Any more questions, Paul?
It's steel. Except those are wood. The two.
No, there's not.
I wanted to
Huh?
get this visual here.
No, Gary, questions?
Could I ask another question?
After Gary.
Okay, sorry.
Just got the structural is not 2x but 4x material or 3x material. Is that what it is?
I'm trying to remember. They're 6x6.
And the
hollow
beams
steel
are 4 by
sections.
16 that go on the top.
Or 4 by 16 wood. Okay.
There's been a desire because of the proximity to the train tracks that it sort of mimics train tracks.
So are you going to use...
Somewhat. I
You're
mean,
not going to
it's-
use train tracks, then?
No.
You're not going to use... I mean...
Any more questions?
We don't want to use railroad ties because they're pretty toxic. And you're right above patio seating.
Any more questions, Gary? Kurt?
So the reason that the trellis detail changes to this shape at this location, and why those don't all work together?
I'll show you that. That's part of. It's kind of hard to see in this, but I'll see. Basically, what we've been looking at is we've got the trellis area sort of signifies where people are sitting and dining, and this is going to be the entrance. Okay, and what happens is you can come up the middle between the parking, and by way of not working out as well as you'd like it to, that is right around there. So the access point is coming in from between this little walkway comes up and it hits right around here. The front door for the restaurant is planned to be here. So what we're doing, we've gone around and around with how do you create wayfinding to get to this spot so you're walking up, you know it's there. What we've done is we've broken the trellis and said, well, let's just take this area out, which is here and here, and we'll flank it with the planters. And we keep this as negative space. So this acts as negative space, and then we're putting a simple little, and it's really hard to see, but basically what we have is two posts coming up, steel posts that will attach to the concrete lintel across here. It'll be just a little flat steel eyebrow that comes out, and it'll have a little light on it, and that'll signify the door. So we're trying intentionally to do something that's different than this so that it creates an individuality based on this sort of negative zone of trellis and giving it sort of an entry piece.
Okay, one further question.
Sorry.
That's all right. That was helpful. Were these slats always shown coming up to that height, or was that a change too?
Originally, we didn't have anything here because actually originally we had a gabion here in the approved set, which is sitting there.
Like 4 foot high?
Yeah. And now that we have a tenant and we're working with the tenant on how to envision their outdoor space, they've come to us and said, we want to have this area here that we can kind of have people feel like they're not sitting on the parking lot all the time. So that's why this got higher in this location. There's a little fire pit out here, and people can kind of sit out there and enjoy it.
Okay. Thank you.
Comments? Who wants to start?
I'll jump in briefly. Just how far does this come out in front of this building? I know it's a question, but
Oh, great.
like a foot or
It's
two.
a little deceiving. I'm sorry about the
Yeah.
elevation. We should have had a close-up. Basically, there's a steel pole that's going to come up attached to the face of the building.
Okay.
Just well, here's the face. That'll come up, and it'll have a little awning that sticks out over the front door.
Perfect.
4 feet.
Yeah, and this is like 16 feet in front, and that's what gave you the negative space.
Exactly.
Yeah. My comment is everything that I see here is fine, except for the minimalist of the two planks seems odd. That's all I can say. It doesn't seem right. It seems unfinished, and that's why I was going back to these drawings. I wanted everyone else to see them because what you had before had more interest and more character. This change here, I can understand the practicality of it. The issue with the pennies on the outside of the building, something will get placed there, and that's more interesting than painting it gray and making it go away. So, so I could support that as well.
Okay.
Who else wants to go?
I'll make a couple comments.
Sure.
I focused on that enclosure right at the end, but I feel that because you now have a lot of steel and hard elements on the building, and in some areas combining it very nicely with the planting, that I would rather see, say, a green wall there as opposed to more rusted steel. That's my viewpoint. I also agree with Paul. I think that some more recognizable traditional trellising should go on as opposed to what you have. To me, it seems more like a sculpture as opposed to a trellis. And I think those can come together, but I'm not sure it's really successful the way it's done at the moment. I think on building C that I'm not convinced that pennies would be an appropriate finishing material, and I would prefer something that that enhanced the building, but wasn't, that was more in keeping with other finishes that you've used on the site. Those are my only comments.
Thanks, Carrie or Stephanie? Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, I think the changes are acceptable. I don't think they're excessive. I kind of miss, losing the gabions around the corner, but we haven't lost them on the building itself. I mean, it was kind of an interesting use for erosion material. As far as the building C goes, well, let's talk about the fence, the almost overhigh fence. I think that it would benefit with some larger landscaping, at least in front of a portion of that, and not just the low landscaping. And then I think the material would be acceptable if there was some type of ornamental red bud or something like that in front of it. And I think the creativeness of the idea of the pennies on the wall, I mean, I have seen it done, and it looks successful. And it's something for people to talk about and sit around and laugh about. So, and I don't know whether it's legal to do it, but
I was wondering about that.
but I think it would be interesting. And if it's not legal to do something like that, I wouldn't be opposed to doing something else interesting on the outside of that building, whether it be jewels or
Bedazzled?
Bedazzle it. or shells or something like that. I think that maybe a building that small in this particular area, something interesting should happen to it. So.
Thanks, Carrie. Stephanie?
I would agree that, with most of the comments made. I would just say with regard to the outdoor eating area or seating area, the material there on the wall, if not the tall planting, then perhaps it could be a wood structure rather than the rusted slats. That's just,
We've gone back and forth
yeah,
with
exactly.
wood
I think that it could be either or, would be acceptable. Either taller planting with the rusted steel or lower planting with wood.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I don't really have anything further to add. I think the changes are appropriate, and I think rusted metal or wood was. I think that either one, something taller than 10 inches high would be nice there. And I do encourage you to be creative with Building C's exterior finishes within the law, whatever that is. So I'll leave it to. I think that if we approved it, I'd like to just see how you were going to attach them, whether it's a scallop detail overlapping or grouted, what's the spacing, just before I approve something like that. But I am encouraged by that idea. I think it sounds fun. So
You don't want to see them attached with gum.
maybe not attached with gum.
Art gum.
Madam
As
Chair,
long as it's a big pink piece of gum.
I want to ask one last question. There was no change in parking?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that. There was a change. A decrease, actually. This parking lot hasn't changed at all. This little side lot over here, because this is a separate lot and they don't connect, and they have separate entrances, we need an ADA spot in this parking lot. So we now have an ADA here and an ADA there. So we lost one parking spot here to get that ADA offload.
And you've
area.
run that by transportation.
Oh, yeah.
That was a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
I can make a motion returning the project back to consent. We're giving it positive comments that the applicant is to provide additional tall planting at the private dining walls. The second comment would be to add additional trellis material to the trellis dining outside. Is this
So
building
the
B?
horizontal member?
To the top. Building B. He has 2 planks, and it's a little bit too minimalistic, but I'm not going to tell him what to do.
You just did.
But we like it.
Add additional trellising. And item C, the board can give positive support towards building C and the pennies, and bring that back to consent for final when those details are done.
Somebody would like to second that motion, hopefully? Seconded by Gary. Under discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4, I have to step down on. That's also the same applicant, 528 Anacapa Street, because I live next door.
See you, Don. Just color.
This is final review. Your name for the record?
Clay Orell with AB Design Studio. I've got Eric Bear from AB Design Studio as well, and
Lane Goodkind, landscape architect.
Okay. I'll read through the motions, and you can just tell me how you address them. I'm sorry, I was on. Study the sheet metal details for the main entry canopy.
I think he was actually referring to this part of the building. Originally, we had metal to match what the French press had done. If I can find that. So,
Yeah.
so the French press had this galvanized metal panel kind of skirting the parapet here. And we had proposed that previously in a larger scale, and the board was a little concerned about the material. What we've opted to do is go with a kind of
A louvered?
corrugated metal that matches the metal we're using in the awnings. It matches the awnings that were done over there. So we're still staying with a metal panel. It just looked appropriate when we looked at this instead of doing that out of paint or color or something.
Okay. Item 2, the board is concerned about the trash enclosure detail. If the planting becomes unsightly, address the concern with the landscape architect. And here he is. Just,
Do you want to give your color?
Sure.
Pull those out.
I don't know what they're.
is it the same kind of
It's the
solution?
same- It's the same solution. There's some details which
Okay.
maybe will address some concerns. Let's see here. So this is a prefabricated unit, and this describes the attachment method and a little bit about its manufacture. It's a non-compostable, decomposing polypropylene fabric, non-woven, totally UV resistant, as well as the backing. The backing is a 10 millimeter corrugated plastic, which is very high, really rigid and very resistant. It's recycled plastic, EPDM. So it actually looks really good right when it's installed. It actually just looks like you're putting up a really soft black felt, and it looks good at install. And what you do is The plants themselves are wrapped again in a polypropylene, and they're tucked in each one of those pockets. So what you have is this sort of black foil for these little green sprigs coming out. It looks good from day one. It looks good all the way up until it completely infills. And as far as the longevity and its appearance over the long term, there's a lot of obviously variables, and it really depends on the plant material. But with this project, I've chosen to use almost a weed. It's like such a durable plant that you can't kill it, no matter where it goes. So that's what I'm using here. One of them's a bromeliad, which will survive without water. It's just an air plant. And the other one's an asparagus fern, which is this really rugged, durable, like weedy species that actually always looks good. It has just a few leaves that fronds. It sort of looks like a fern.
And that's every other one, or two of one, one of one, two of one?
It's more of like an 80%, 20% mix,
Okay.
because the one needs to be in shade, the other one will tolerate full sun.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Item 3 was the development plans, and item 4 was the standard archaeological discovery conditions to be reproduced on the plans. Has that been done?
I didn't get the part about it being reproduced on the plans, but do we have that on here?
no.
Well, let's make that a condition for later.
Yeah.
All right, that's all we have.
Check.
You have anything else for your presentation?
I don't think so.
All right. I'll open up public comment. Anybody from the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, I'll close it and return it back to the board for questions.
I have a question about material in the door.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay.
The door of the trash enclosure?
Yeah, last time we presented that was just a galvanized panel. It's not really intended to have a big X on it, but it would be just a galvanized metal door.
It's not, there's no big X on it?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair. So a couple of weeks ago, I was driving by and I noticed that on the existing building, there's some units on the roof that are showing.
Like that one?
Yeah. Wondering if thought about trying to address those.
We're not really doing anything on that building per se, so we hadn't really considered it.
Okay.
That's the building here. We're basically adding on here, so we hadn't really addressed that.
Okay. And then, did anything else change on the elevation since the last review, or is it just those metal panels?
That changed. I think we picked up. We changed a window over here. We needed some more shear in this part of the building, so we had a couple windows. I think we had
Two side by side.
two of these, like this and that zone, so that got smaller. That reduced in scale. We're showing lighting along here now. The awning, I think the last time we were here, the awning came all the way over. I'm pretty sure that was already there. A couple things on the landscape plan changed, just in the front patio.
Yeah, just front patio configuration.
Let's see. Here, you get yours?
Sure. There it is.
Are they? So this was all consistent. This change, we've got a low wall kind of at the sidewalk that's very similar to what they've done here on this side. And then we've got some planters. We're anticipating, at least for now, that some tenant might come that wants to be able to have that a little bit more private as a patio. That was a change. This hasn't really changed. I can't think of anything else at the moment, Kirk.
Okay. I did have another question about the elevations.
Sure.
These little columns are plaster also in between?
They're going to be plastered, yeah. They're actually steel, but we'll wrap them. Actually, no, this is wood. Wait, no, these are steel.
on French press. and
So,
ours, yeah.
okay, we were just talking about this. So it'll be finished out to match the body of the building.
Did you consider
You go.
making those steel to match the doors or match the other trim finishes, the other steel finishes, as opposed to a thin little element of plaster.
Yeah, I could go either way on that. Just these two right here.
Yeah, in between the windows up above as well.
Yeah.
Just those thin little elements.
We could just wrap it with brake metal.
These are wood. These are existing or wood, or what are those?
They're
those are
block.
steel painted.
Or they're steel and they're painted. They're tube steel and they're painted today.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Gary, do you have any questions?
On the galvanized metal that you're using for the new detail above there. I'm looking on A402, and it says that you're going to use a Type B wide ribbed galvanized roof decking material for that. Do you have a sample of what that's going to be like? Or do you have a cut sheet or something?
We don't have a sample. It appears that's what was installed on the French press canopy.
Is that what was that what's on the French
it's a
press
wide rib.
canopy?
Yeah.
So
It's
it's not corrugated. It's
I know what you're. Yeah, I know what
Square
roof
box.
decking is.
yeah, and it's
But-
not the angled like bead
It's
edge.
not the beaded edge or the V groove one. It doesn't have holes in it.
No.
Okay. Fine. And I didn't notice it on there, so I won't notice it there. Then on the landscaping, what type of material? It says it's mounted on hat channel. Is that going to be just mounted on galvanized hat channel? And
It's not visible, but yeah.
will that hold up longevity-wise to all of the waterings and so
It's not
forth?
exposed to any water. There's a vapor barrier and a formula plastic sheet separating that metal from the irrigation.
Sorry, Phil.
Okay.
So
And then the last question, the parapet, the AC units there will be not visual from with the parapet that's proposed on the new building.
The new equipment.
on our addition,
Yeah.
we actually diagrammed that. If you go to A402, you can see we're looking at our sight lines from Anacapa, and they're placed really dead middle of the building. You see the sight line there, Gary?
I do.
On the
I
lower
see it.
elevation, and same from the other side. So we've made sure that we put them in an area where they wouldn't be visible.
Okay. Great.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
On the final approval submittal checklist, see that you called out Tier 2 stormwater management, and it was my understanding this was Tier 3. So I was wondering how you come up with Tier 2.
I was under the impression that it's 3,000 square feet. Yeah, so it doesn't meet the threshold for square footage.
Well, for commercial, the threshold is 500 square feet of replaced impermeable surface. So you've replaced a parking lot with a building. So I'm quite sure it's Tier 3. And, well, that just needs to be demonstrated. Compliance with Tier 3 needs to be demonstrated prior to a final approval.
So you need calculations,
Right.
and that's it, basically. Calculations demonstrating
Well,
our
you have to-
And a
BMPs.
solution.
Yeah, our BMPs, and then a calculation demonstrating the
Yeah,
BMPs.
you have to retain and treat a 1-inch storm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tony, just a point of clarification on that. Is that something that we can deal with in plan check? Because I know we will have to.
No, I've got pretty clear direction from staff that we have to have it prior to a final. If you think it looks good, you could say it's ready for a final and come back to consent, showing the Tier 3 lines.
Okay, then that's the direction we'll get. We only have a few more meetings before the end of the year.
Go ahead and put us on the agenda.
So does someone want to make a motion?
I'll give it a shot, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I think we could return, well, I think we probably ought to return to full board just because the Tier 3 requirements can substantially alter your paving plan. You need to have more permeable surfaces in order to accommodate that. There's multiple ways to address it, but it's my experience that the permeable paving is going to be an essential element. Right now, you're just asphalt, right, in the parking lot.
We're replacing existing. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think it probably should return to the full board with the following comments to show how Tier 3 requirements are being accommodated, to provide screening for the existing mechanical unit on the existing building, and study adding brake metal to the intermediate posts between the garage doors and windows on the west elevation, and maybe matching color or material to the existing posts between garage doors on the north elevation.
Anything else?
That's it.
Does someone want to second that?
Second that.
Okay, second by Stephanie. Any other under discussion?
Mr. Chair, you didn't say when. Would the applicant like to be continued 2 weeks?
Yes.
December 10th. That'll be our last meeting of the year also.
Okay. Return in 2 weeks. I would like to add to the motion that he puts on the archaeological discovery conditions reproduced on the plans. Yes. And that just verbally doesn't need to be in the minutes that there's no X on the trash enclosure doors. Okay. Anything else? I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Now on to the last item of the night, which is item 513 Garden Street. I'm going to go get Dawn.
Hello. Hi.
We're on to item number 5, 15 Garden Street.
Sorry.
Projects are for final review. We last saw this project.
Thanks, Tony.
Last item, 513 Garden, here for final. Again, we last saw this on November 12th. The motion, just to refresh everybody's memories on 2 items, further study the massing shifts, restudy reducing the impacts on the south and north elevations at the property lines by possible massing changes or fenestration or other changes to mitigate those impacts. Particularly to the bungalow to the north and to the third-story element to the south. Number 2, in all cases, the parapet heights where visible from public or adjacent properties should be high enough to block view of the photovoltaic panels. Your name for the record.
Okay, I'm Barry Winnick with Winnick Architects, and I'll let everybody else introduce themselves. We have a guest visitor today.
I'm Mark Macy from Macy Architecture.
I'm Alan Macy, the project cheerleader, developer.
An artist and everything else.
David Black, landscape architect.
All right, thanks.
Great. So one of the great things this week is you all are familiar with the project because we've been here in front of each of you recently. And we also have Mark here to help answer questions, which will be great. So that way, if there's any, should help expedite the process. I'm just going to take the comments, just go down those really quickly. And I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to start with the one about parapet height first. That was comment
The
two.
easy one.
The easy one, exactly. So and I'm going to flip, really the best page to look at is the front elevation, which goes in the set a little ways. Here we go. It's about 5 pages in, Paul, if you want to get there. Stephanie, you already found it. So anyway, we did, after the study, if you remember, we started with 42-inch parapets, and then we studied shorter parapets, so now we've come back with 30-inch parapets, which perfectly hide the solar panels, and therefore, on the whole front of the building. Makes it rather consistent. The other thing, just as you're looking at the elevations, we've shown the shade and shadow to give a little bit better rendering of the building, and I apologize that we didn't better characterize it before, because the truth is this is what should have been presented last time. Then taking the other topics, and it's actually the little refinements I think have really helped a lot. Probably the biggest shift was, and it's a big concession too in terms of the spaces internally, the artist workspaces have been each reduced 7 inches in height from down to 9'2". To 9'2" height. They used to be 9'9", and in order to do that, or the choice to do that, was to get the recesses on the sides of the building back. What happens is by taking out a tread of stairs, we're able to pick up 11 inches. So those recesses, the only way to find it was, in fact, to take it out of the artist spaces. So you'll see on both the north and south elevations, it's been kicked back a foot to get much more shade and shadow along the building. So we do get that architectural effect, and we made a concession for the artist spaces. And then the third really significant change was the idea that our chair brought up, which was, what about getting a south-facing view, if it's possible, for that top unit? So that third-story unit has now been pushed back 6 feet. I'll show you in plan afterwards. But it's been pushed back 6 feet and has a little outdoor terrace. And because it's far enough back from the property line, it can have windows. So, and actually, it creates a rather nice rear elevation, and it also creates a little shadow on the internal court elevation. So it turns out rather nice. It's, a little bit of extra structural work with the cantilevering. And probably the best place to see it is on the third floor plan, which I'll flip into the set. And so you can see it right here. So that area becomes outdoor space, and it's been pushed over. So it then cantilevers over the open space 6 feet. Now, part of this was also, had to be pretty careful, because we have that whole open air requirement, and if you saw the calculations, we're at like 15.2% or something. We're almost not making it. The provisions in the ordinance allow for a cantilever. If this, for instance, like over here where we travel between two spaces and it's supported at both sides, the space beneath that can't be counted as open space. But because that space has a cantilever and it's only supported on one side, it does qualify. So anyway, we're really the skin of our teeth getting this to fit. So that's really that major thing. I wanted to go back on sort of the thing about the facades and just talk about that one, the attention. So, you've seen that we've broken up the facade looking at the north and south, where this is really the major thing. And also, because the parapets have come down to the 30 inches, plus subtracted another 7 inches, we've lowered the heights of the building all along the street. And I just wanted to, because it got brought up last time, a little bit of the history. This will be the only thing I do about history, is once upon a time we did study this building, this portion of the building, which is next to the bungalow, being a one-story building facing the street, and then having it 2 stories at the back. And what had happened when we presented that to the commission, to the board, to get a pro and con, and most people felt that the aesthetic went downhill, that it was better the way it was presented originally with 3 similar volumes. And it was also pointed out that the sun studies, if one were looking at that, it made sense in plan to provide light at the back, because that's where your western light's coming from. In other words, so if I go in plan, what was being determined is that if you have light coming across the site.
That way.
Exactly.
This way.
So, if the light's coming this way, that's actually going to benefit this side unit more to have the lower unit at the back rather than at the front. And so that's what we've stayed with, and I just wanted to go through that history because we actually had studied that in the first incarnation. So, am I on the wrong elevation? No, I'm on the correct elevation. Here's the front building, and then there's the back building, so that it's lower than that one is. So anyway, just that we wanted to address that. And the rest of it, I think, unless there's just know that you want to present, I think we're pretty good, so we're ready for questions. And then if there's anything new in landscape, okay, so you're basically available to answer questions as well. Okay.
Thanks, Barry. We have some public comment. I have Gerardo first, followed by Clay. Come on up.
Surrender a seat.
Maybe if somebody could give up their seat for a couple of minutes.
Okay. Just make sure the light's on.
Okay. My name is Gerardo Ayala, and I am here to speak for this project as a native Santa Barbarian. I also happen to sit on the First District, or on the Arts Commission for the First District. I live in this district. I think this project is a very exciting project. As someone who, I also spent 12 years working with the homeless, and I want a little bit of that context because I wouldn't come and speak on behalf of a project just very casually. This is very important to me in terms of the kind of development that I would love to see in my hometown. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in Austin, Texas, where I've seen some very innovative projects. This is that type of project. I think it's a great direction, the kind of direction that I'd love to see Santa Barbara move in. I think that in addition to, I really appreciate the aesthetics of this building, but also in terms of post-construction, the kind of contribution that this type of building is going to make to the city of Santa Barbara. And that's what's very exciting, the idea of this collaboration between artists, scientists, and people in the role of technology. I think this is very, very exciting, and I hope that I've taken a special interest in the front zone because it's in my first district. So I've been very engaged in that. The proximity, I think this is exactly the kind of development that I would love to see in the city. I think there's an authenticity to this project that I really have a deep appreciation for. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Okay, Clay, followed by Mickey. Mickey Garcia. Clay Boudin.
Everyone? Yes, my name is Clay Bodine, and I'm the president of the Fishbone Artists Collaborative. And I'm here to speak in favor of this project for a couple of reasons. Fishbone has been an art, science, and technology hub for now 10 years in the kind of eastern funk zone off Quarantina Street. And it's been a very, very exciting mix between UCSB and our local artist community. And this project is kind of an extension or a like furthering of that vision of how that collaboration can be, manifested. And I think the thing that's very interesting about this is that it's kind of represents a hub for that kind of creative activity, blending those skills. And we've actually, my partner and I have just finished a study of the funk zone for the Santa Barbara Foundation. And one of the things that we found was that the creative community is growing pretty rapidly in Santa Barbara, and particularly in the design and the kind of engineering creativity side. So this is a beautiful kind of an anchor, provides some live workspace, which is like very much needed. That really doesn't exist in Santa Barbara. And the other thing that's really interesting about the project is the opportunity to build larger scale things. That's one of the things that we suffer from. We have a small space. It's a 3-story industrial condo, very limited in terms of larger scale space to build projects of the kind that we do that go to festivals and even local and regional festivals that require things that might be 20 or 30 feet tall. Can't do that in our space. We've been using spaces outside of our building, this is a beautiful kind of a space for that kind of fabrication and design and prototyping. So, I strongly support this project.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mickey Garcia.
Hi there. I'm Mickey Garcia. I'm the executive director of the Santa Barbara Contemporary Arts Forum. It's a 36-year-old contemporary art museum, non-collecting art museum here in Santa Barbara. And I'm here as a colleague and a supporter. One of the things that has intrigued me about this project is that people like myself, people who work at the New Noise Music Conference and others, are really working very hard to bring the most compelling, world-class contemporary and modern exhibitions and artistic practice to Santa Barbara. I think it's really important. We're known as a cultural hub, but mostly of the classical kind. We've got the symphony, the granada, the ballet, and what we're trying to do, a lot of us here in town, are to really compete with Laguna Beach, with Phoenix, with Aspen, with other towns that have the kind of diversity, like Residencies, which SBcast is doing, have the kind of diversity that's really attracting a younger demographic, and that's the demographic that has the economic impact that we're going to need, especially in the future, is that demographic to make the choice to come to Santa Barbara. Not only that, but what we do, not only do we work with national and international artists, but we also promote the artist in our region. And we consider ourselves very generative. And what is really exciting about this project is it also is a think tank. It's an incubator for artistic practice that comes out of Santa Barbara. It has an index of the place that it was made, which is here, as it goes on into the larger world. And I think that's really important, that we are competitive, that we are known as rigorous and challenging, and there isn't any other residency in this town, and I think it's really important. It also provides my organization an opportunity to have artists come and stay. We commission a lot of new work from artists around the world. They can come and stay and also interact with the community, so they have more deeper, more resonant experiences with living artists. And I think it's really important not to just support the arts as a sort of anonymous thing that's 100 years old, but really artists who are living and working in our community. I think it's what makes Santa Barbara really special, and we need to continue to do that as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mickey. Leon Olson.
I'm Leon Olson. I represent the owners of the property at Garden and Haley Street, which is about 10 feet from this property. We think this is an important project for this little community and are anxious for it to be underway and hope to see it go forward. I also own the property at some of the properties at Coda Street Studios, a block away from this project. We see a kinship between what we were thinking originally when we designed that project and built that project and the idea here. We were not so successful in being able to create a project that artists could afford. We have a beautiful project. We have one that many people like to come and see and talk about in Santa Barbara, but it didn't meet the needs, the basic needs that I think this project has a chance to do. And so I also was on the board of directors for Homes for People when we built El Zoco, and the importance of that project to artists I think is clear and has sustained. And then lastly, I come to you as a developer, and having sat in this chair many times, and sometimes came back frequently to iron out certain problems. And one of the things that happens during that process is the project gets more expensive and more expensive due to delays, and so I urge you to find as early solution to these problems and to allow this project to go forward as soon as possible. I think it was great for Santa Barbara, and I think we need more projects like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. All right, is there anybody that wants to speak that did not submit a pink piece of paper? No. Any other comment, Tony? No? Okay. Questions from the board? Who has questions? Anybody?
Just a simple question. The height of the parapet, when the project was given project design approval versus the height of the parapet in the front of the building now?
Don't know that offhand.
Well, let's look that up. That's important.
You do have the original drawings in the file.
Well, we're looking that up. Do you
Yeah.
have any more questions? Any more questions? Anybody? Do you have questions?
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, we're going to get that one answered. And then while he's trying to find that, I want to keep moving.
The south elevation. This came down this much, Barry?
Okay, the front,
This
at the
space?
street, it came down 7 inches plus.
No, this is not a street, this is a south.
I know, but I'm pointing to this corner.
Yeah, I know, I understand, I got that because of the photovoltaic, I'm talking about all of this back here. It was up to here.
This came to that height.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Actually, we need to
here. I'm
be
sorry.
pointing it out.
Yeah, let's do that. So this used to come up to this same height here, and now it's down there. So it's basically the.
Remember before, Stephanie, the unit on the upper level, the third level was right at the property line with no fenestration.
30 feet almost. Oh, no, 24 It was almost 30 feet, and now it's 30 feet.
Yeah, this is
Any more questions? Oh,
shipping
sorry.
containers. So when it was shipping containers, based on the height of the standard shipping container, the top was 3420, 34.20. There.
The parapet here was
Yeah.
3420.
And then right now we're at 3617.
2 feet increase
Yeah.
because of the parapet, because before it didn't, the photovoltaic panels were shown pretty much flat with a 6-inch or so parapet.
Right,
or
and,
something.
and also that's not
Which
30
didn't meet
feet.
code.
I just want everybody to know that we had, we're starting at grade of 12 something.
Oh, okay.
Just to put it
But
in
that's
context.
apples to apples.
I understand that, but I just don't want them to think that we're 30 feet at the
No,
street.
no, yeah, it's right, 12 and change, 12,
Great.
20, 30.
Okay, did you get your question
So
answered?
we can reiterate that the project, when it was approved for project design approval, was at 34.2, and now it's at 36.17, which is basically 2 feet higher than what it was previously.
It's the advantage.
From the same point, apples to apples.
Apples to apples,
Correct.
that's the plus.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
since obviously we're going with wood framing, we don't have to have 7-foot, 10-inch ceilings, which is what the shipping containers would have limited us to.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So looking at this southeast elevation again, a couple of questions. Is this a plaster canopy that's projecting out, or how is that detailed?
It'll be a brow, and it'll probably be detailed, so like with a fine edge, like the Cortin paneling.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you haven't detailed it yet?
It's
but
kind of
that's-
deep because there's a
haven't
heavy
detailed it
shadow
yet.
line underneath it.
Yeah, it'll be protecting it's basically a sliding glass door from the elements.
So it'll be 2-foot projection, or 3, or what are you imagining?
Probably like 3 feet or something. We'll dial it in based upon the sun angle and then a little bit of rain protection.
Okay, and then this thin, it looks like a plaster wall coming up alongside where the stair element is.
Yes.
Is that looks like it's proud of, it's at this surface,
That's right.
but it's protecting this roof? Is it a necessary element that's coming up? Does it have to come up that high? Could it be set back? Could it come behind the steel? Could it be steel, or?
Yeah, we can look and plan, but basically it's like guard railing height. When the stairs adjacent to it, some doesn't fall into the lower roof area.
For the roof of the for the roof of the stair?
The stair coming down,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if it could be, if it could look more like part of the stair mass as opposed to the plaster.
Like a little plaster wing wall or something to concern the thinness of it or something, visual thinness
Well,
of it.
it's partly visual, and the height that it sticks up above the surface, and the fact that it, if I understand it correctly,
Yeah.
it's flush with this surface, but
Well,
it's
there's a
really
horizontal
addressing.
line that separates it, so
Yeah, let's take a look exactly where it is.
Let's go to the
let's
plan.
go to plan because it doesn't.
It just seems to me incongruent. If there was a better way to.
No, I understand what you're saying. Let's just take a look at it.
That would be this plan, Mark?
Yeah, and what are we talking about with Eric?
We're talking about over here. I'm sorry.
We're talking
Over
here.
here.
Right, we're talking here.
That's it.
On the roof, the way it's shown, it looks like it's coming out here, but maybe it could be part of this roof.
If I'm, is it this in elevation, so it's set back? Is
Well, let's
that
take
what
a
we're
look
saying?
at this. Let's look at 3A5.1. See what's happening there.
Drawing 3.
So that element you're seeing there, I'm assuming is this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's set back from this.
And it's step back. That's why,
Yeah.
that's why that line carries through, I guess.
But it's also, on the elevation, it's shown as, like, it looks like it's way up here as opposed to just a foot above. This is the stairway, Corten steel, right?
This face, yeah, that's Corten steel, yeah.
Well, if you look on the elevation that we're just looking at anyway,
Looks like it comes
it's way
higher.
up, way up. So maybe it's just an error on the elevation.
Maybe drafting error on
You want to go back to the...
I guess let's look at the, like our drawings.
Yeah.
These-
That would be a 4.3 or 4.2.
This right here.
Right.
Well, that section was cut this way, so a little bit higher, and then
It is
it's
just a little
relative to
bit
that
higher.
high.
I see.
And this lowers down once you get to this low roof deck.
But it's
which
stepped
is an
back. It's
advance.
not in the same
Okay.
plane as this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Is that good? There we go.
Good.
Any
Other
more
questions?
No, thank
Any
you.
more questions, anybody? No? Okay, comments. Who wants to go?
I'll make some comments.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate the changes that you made since the last review. Not only with the third story element being set back, that's a huge change, and I think it does help your project. It's improvement. The lowering of the parapet heights, sacrificing that ceiling height in order to eliminate a stair tread, which really helps the articulation of those side elevations. And all around, I think you did appropriately address the comments that were made last time, so I appreciate that. I think, the only thing apparently that's not on the plans is the detailing of that. It's a very minor element. I think it could be handled probably by staff. I don't think it's, whether it's steel or plaster, I think it would be fine. So those would be my comments.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thanks.
Anybody have differing comments? Anybody have anything else to say?
My opinion, I don't need to reiterate it, so.
Well, maybe you should.
Just for the record, it has nothing to do about the function inside the building and all the art stuff. I mean, all that's wonderful. It has to do with the scale of the shoebox next to the other shoebox. And we always have to take care of neighborhood compatibility and what's the adjacency. And a little bit of history is we did suggest a one-story, or I suggested, and you came back with several iterations. You do your homework, and you said, we didn't like that solution, and we liked this solution better. And what was interesting is prior to that iteration was a whole two-story solution. And so I recommended, how about a one-story here next to the little bungalow and put a third story somewhere else. And, so I'm giving you something over here that could be a bonus in the sense that I'm trying to also soften the appearance between the adjacent building. That's the history. And in the end, we got the third story, and we still have the two-story next to the bungalow. So, you got preliminary design approval. We're not here to debate the whole thing. I've just never been sold with it in the sense that it's too strong of an edge next to what I want to say is a well-designed, simple building. So I'm still not going to support it. And to follow up on what Gary says, when this project came to us, it was shipping containers that were stacked, one on top of the other. And what's important for the other board members is we couldn't move it over 2 feet one direction or another, like we do, the wedding cake kind of thing, where we set back the second floor an extra 3 or 4 feet in order to have, instead of a straight up and down, we have a softening edge. We could not do that when it was shipping containers, and that's why we got the straight up and down. We couldn't push it back 4 feet. Now that it's a wood frame, there's new opportunities available, and so that's what Gary will keep on saying. It's a different animal now, but At the same point, I just can't support the project, and I think it's not being sensitive to the adjacent neighbor.
All right, Paul. Gary, you want to segue onto that?
Well, I'll reiterate a lot of those same comments because it
Don't
it
reiterate
is,
the same ones.
I am, because my sentiments are towards that same way. And I do appreciate that you moved back the staircase a little bit. I would have preferred that the staircase got opened up more than that. And I think every time we ask for it, we're getting a little bit. We're getting inches, and I think we're talking about feet. And I think that this project, even as Don said, it's completely turned internal, and externally is not visual to the city at all. It's blank walls. And there's a lot of area inside this building, inside this lot, for it to have been a much better project for the city. That being said, that I am not particularly in favor of this project aesthetically, and I don't think it's the best thing for a building in the city of Santa Barbara. However, the project itself is a great project for the city, and the premise of this project is a great project for the city. And we have given it preliminary approval, and somehow it has gone by staff when it got changed from containers to this. So as a board member, I can't turn back the time on this project and say that the site planning is not correct because you changed to balloon framing. So although I am opposed to the aesthetics of this project, I'm not opposed to moving this project forward for the sake of what good it's going to do for the city. So aesthetically, I'm opposed to this project, but for its use and for how far it's gone, and because of the preliminary that we gave it, I'm going to move the project forward.
Stephanie, what do you have to say?
I appreciate the changes that were made with regards to lowering the parapet on the south elevation, and I support the project.
Sir? Oh, am I the only one?
We liked your comments. You could say them twice.
Just save the best for last.
Wait, this looks like an old project.
I know this is an old project. I was just looking, because I have to agree with Gary that we need to move it forward, and because the massing we already approved, that's why I was looking back at the north, I guess it was northwest elevation, and I just want, just for the record, to look at the previous approval that had a 2-story on Garden Street. And it also had a, this was which level? The second floor plan.
Correct.
And what I was looking for, Barry, but I didn't see
Sure.
was
You went by the elevation.
this one here.
Yeah.
How far back was this plan?
Same. This is in the same place as is now. That goes 2 stories, then 3 stories above it.
But in terms of this face and this face,
A middle of the property.
Yeah, I mean this
is the middle of the
this is
property.
like 20 feet back, right?
and now,
It's more than that.
No, but,
now,
but it's
and
set
now we
back the
have-
same.
now we have, the only difference in the massing is that we had all this the same,
Correct.
and then this used to come down here.
Right. It stepped down
This
more
is
before.
still stepped way back.
Correct.
So in terms of the massing changes, you've increased the height of this wall
Correct.
by approximately
It's probably going to be about another 4 feet.
Four
Well, it had to
feet.
do with the workspace within. So on the ground floor, we have 6 basically workspaces. 4 of those now are at 9 feet 2, and the remaining 2 are 14 feet. That's the advantage.
This is a one-story.
Of the wood frame.
It's
that
a
was down.
one-story. What Mark is talking about is that in order to make that one more useful to the artists, that one has a higher ceiling space. Ceiling
It's coming
height.
off the intermediate landing of the stair. So we're taking
And this
advantage
is,
of
but
that
this is still a
situation.
one-story behind a two-story.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So I appreciate the changes as well because as as everybody knows, my hang-up was the third-story element on the south property line that wasn't part of the previous approval. And I just thought that unit could benefit from getting some light and air. And I also am in favor of keeping the parapet heights the same all the way around and not having that kind of weird jog parapet. So, I am pleasantly pleased that hopefully we can move this project forward. Yes, Stephanie?
One more comment that I may offer that
Do you want to comment?
We don't have a landscape architect here present, but
We do, actually.
The landscape architect on our board present, but he typically makes comments such as when people have these pockets for planting, anytime there's an opportunity to plant.
Yeah, maybe
we
we
like
should
to
have
encourage
people, Chris come back and look at that.
people to plant. I'm just saying I want to add that to the comment on this project, that anytime there's an opportunity to plant, that they plant something.
Maybe David wants to comment on the planting in those areas.
Yeah, and just so you know, Chris did have comments last time, and we followed those comments, but by all means,
Yeah,
please do.
we provided additional planting along the entry drive, and, I guess the question is, could we have added more? Sort of an architectural question, I think, too, relative to windows and what have you, but.
Actually, I think Stephanie's
it's
asking
just really the
specifically now
pockets
to
that
these
you
pockets.
So-
You created these pockets.
How did you plant those out, David?
Or did you?
I don't think,
Or did
we might be concerned about like how one has overtime access and maintenance of that, because there's zero
Yeah.
property line situations. With adjacent neighbors' fences and other weird things on the property,
Yeah.
or chain link fences and whatnot. So
Where there was no access, we wouldn't have planted anything.
it might be a tough one. I'm all for it. We kind of, I think, working with David, had created this kind of cool thing where we have occupied roofs, like we're really using all faces of the building.
This is
Our
planted,
project
right?
means-
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're also
Plantings on
planting
the
the
roofs.
perimeter, so these
Yeah.
things will cascade down.
Yeah,
which I
there's
think
vines
is almost
cascade
more
down.
dramatic.
I mean, we're certainly okay with that suggestion of adding that to a motion, that any opportunity to plant be taken, but obviously ones that can be maintained. We just don't want to plant things where they're, won't last long. Yeah.
Well, what's the feasibility of that, of putting, say, a vine in there with some irrigation and just letting it grow?
Well, it has to be accessible in order for it to be maintained. And, I'm certainly open to.
Currently, those spaces are accessible, right?
No.
Well, even on the,
we have a
the
nice property
south
over
side,
here.
even on the southwest
They'd
side.
have to put a door.
You'd have to.
Yeah,
On the
there's
inside.
There's a fence.
I mean, I'll give my own experience.
ramshackle fences that are made out of boards and plywood.
Okay.
And
And irrigation does fail. I have that happening in front of my building where you have to go fix it.
It's these areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
David's plan wasn't updated. They're actually not as deep as, this is a roof?
well, yeah, this is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also just to know, I mean,
Shallow.
maybe things will change, but I think what you have to know is that's what it looks like right now. So even when this building's built, there's going to be this along it. So someday when that stuff gets taken down, then, maybe the landlord that's adjacent will want to have plantings, and then they'll be agreeable to put plantings on it. I mean, it is kind of a neighborhood that's going to evolve. And, so that's the reality today.
And every opportunity we have to plant vines, across the full extent of those fencing, that we do that. So and that's throughout the site. So I think it'll have a greater landscape presence than may appear here.
Okay.
Great.
Any more comments? All right.
I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion for final approval as submitted.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Stephanie. Under discussion, anything? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll be in favor.
Okay. 4-1.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
And the good news is you guys don't have us coming back in front of you in 2 weeks.
Oh, we'll miss you, Barry.
Well, thank you. You guys have been very patient. We'll find another project to come back with. Thank you.
Thanks. And that concludes the Architectural Board of Review meeting for November 26th. Thank you for listening.